My brother screamed in my Tribeca lobby that I had stolen his inheritance, even though he cannot pay his own electric bill, when I bought a penthouse for $2.6 million. My family called me selfish. I thought I was purchasing a view of the Hudson, but I actually bought a mirror reflecting our ugly truth. This is not a story about revenge, it is simply the story of how I finally stopped paying their price. My name is Layla Bennett. I am 32 years old, a director of investment at Westward Orion Equity Group in Manhattan. And as I stood in the doorway of a rented house in the suburbs of Denver, I knew exactly how much my silence was worth. It was worth the price of a plane ticket I had paid for myself. It was worth the 3 days of vacation time I would never get back. And tonight, it was going to be worth the cost of a bottle of Cabernet that cost more than my brother's car payments. We were not at my parents' house. My parents, Martin and Elaine, had decided that this Thanksgiving required a neutral ground, or perhaps they simply wanted to play at being wealthy for a few days. They had rented a sprawling, modern Airbnb in Aurora that smelled faintly of lavender disinfectant and desperation. The furniture was that specific kind of beige that looks expensive in photographs, but feels like cardboard when you sit on it. It was a stage set. We were the actors. My mother was already busy rewriting the script. She was bustling around the dining table, removing the host's perfectly adequate placemats and replacing them with a heavy, white linen tablecloth she had brought from home in her checked luggage. "I do not trust the detergents people use," she had whispered to me the moment I walked in, clutching her bag of silverware like it contained the crown jewels. "You never know who ate off these forks." Layla, I watched her smooth out the fabric. It was a perfect metaphor for the Hartley family. Cover up the reality with something distinctively ours, something white and pristine, so we can pretend the surface underneath is not scratched and cheap. Then there was Dylan. My brother is 34 years old, 2 years older than me, and yet somehow he has remained perpetually 22 in the eyes of our parents. He was sitting on the faux leather sectional, his laptop open, wires trailing across the floor like tripwires. He wore a blazer over a graphic t-shirt, the uniform of the misunderstood genius. Dylan is always on the verge of something. He is always one conversation away from greatness. He is a man of potential, a word that in our house means he has never finished a single thing he started. "Hey, Layla," he said, barely looking up from his screen. "Flight was okay." "Fine," I said, setting my bag down. "Good. Grab a drink. Big night? I have got news." My father, Martin, was standing by the kitchen island, holding a bottle of red wine with the reverence of a sommelier, though I knew he had bought it at Costco. He poured a generous glass for Dylan, filling it nearly to the brim, and then poured a noticeably smaller amount for me. "Good to see you." "Layla," my father said, "work is keeping you busy." "Yes," I said, taking the glass. "The market is volatile right now, but we are managing." That was it. That was the extent of his curiosity about my life. He turned immediately back to Dylan, his eyes softening, glowing with that specific, blinding warmth that has always made me feel like I'm standing in a shadow. "All right, son," Martin said. "The floor is yours." We were summoned to the living room. This was the ritual. Before the turkey, before the pie, there had to be the performance. Dylan stood up, cleared his throat, and connected his laptop to the massive television mounted on the wall. The screen flickered to life. A PowerPoint presentation appeared. The font was Comic Sans, or something close to it, large and childish against a background of stock photos depicting galaxies and nebulas. The title slide read, "The Future of Healing, a Quantum NFT Art Space." I took a sip of wine. It tasted metallic. Dylan began to speak. He used words he had clearly harvested from LinkedIn articles he did not understand. He spoke about synergy. He spoke about disruption. He used the phrase quantum mindset 3 times in the first 2 minutes. The slides were blurry, pixelated images of digital avatars holding crystals, interspersed with graphs that had no y-axis. He was pitching a platform where people could buy digital art that allegedly emitted healing frequencies through the blockchain. It was nonsense. It was absolute, Unadulterated gibberish. It was also, according to the financial projection on slide 12, going to require a seed round investment. I am looking for $150,000, Dylan said, his voice cracking slightly before he found his confidence again. Just to get the servers running and hire a Solidity developer. I have a guy in Estonia who is ready to go. 150,000. That is the buy-in for the ground floor. He looked at our parents. He did not look at me. He knew I worked in private equity. He knew I analyzed businesses for a living. He knew that if I opened my mouth, I would shred this entire presentation into confetti within 30 seconds. But he also knew I would not say a word, because I never did. The room was silent for a beat. Then, my mother brought her hands together. "Oh, Dylan," she breathed, her eyes shimmering with tears. "It is so visionary. It is so you." Martin nodded solemnly, swirling his wine. "It is bold," he said. "I like the aggression of the model. 150,000. It is a stretch, but for family. For a legacy. We can look at the retirement accounts. Elaine, we can make this work." They were looking at him like he was Elon Musk. They were looking at him like he had just invented fire, rather than a way to burn cash in a digital incinerator. I sat there, freezing. I felt that familiar sensation, the one I had lived with since I was a child, the feeling of being invisible, of being a ghost in my own life. I was the one who managed portfolios worth hundreds of millions. I was the one who had spent nights sleeping under my desk at the office to make partner track, and yet, here, I was just the audience for Dylan's latest delusion. My cousin Tessa was sitting in the corner armchair. Tessa is the only one in the family who sees things clearly, mostly because she stopped asking Martin for money a decade ago. She caught my eye. She gave me a small, tight smile, the kind that acknowledges a shared tragedy. She leaned forward, her voice cutting through the thick fog of admiration surrounding Dylan. "That is really interesting." "Dylan," Tessa said politely. Then she turned her head toward me. Her voice was soft, intentional. "What about you?" "Layla. I heard you got a promotion recently, and didn't you move?" The air in the room shifted. The spotlight, which had been firmly fixed on the golden boy, flickered and dragged itself reluctantly toward me. Martin frowned, as if annoyed by the interruption. Elaine glanced at me, her hand halfway to the breadbasket. "Oh, yes, Layla," Elaine said, dismissively. "You are still in the city, renting that little place on the Upper East Side." "No," I said. The word hung there. I set my wineglass down on the coffee table. I looked at Dylan, who was beaming with the pride of a man who had just successfully scammed his elderly parents. I looked at Martin, who was already mentally calculating which stocks to sell to fund this disaster. "I am not renting anymore," I said. My voice was steady. It sounded like a stranger's voice. "I moved 2 weeks ago. I bought a place." Elaine stopped moving. "Bought," she asked. "In the city." "But the interest rates?" "Layla? Martin always says renting is better right now." "Unless you have, I bought a penthouse in Tribeca," I said. The silence that followed was not the silence of awe. It was the silence of a vacuum, sucking the oxygen out of the room. $2.6 million. I continued. I decided to say the number. I wanted to taste it. I put down 40% in cash. It has a private terrace and a view of the Hudson River. It is not an investment property. It is my home. Martin's hand jerked. It happened in slow motion. The stem of his wineglass snapped, or perhaps he just let go. The glass hit the edge of the white marble coaster, tipped, and shattered. Red wine Cabernet, heavy and dark, splashed across the pristine white linen tablecloth my mother had smoothed out with such care. It looked like a gunshot wound. Nobody moved to clean it up. The liquid spread, soaking into the fibers, turning the white fabric into a deep, violent crimson. Martin stared at me. His jaw was slack. 2.6 million, he whispered. Elaine looked from Martin to Dylan, and then her eyes landed on me with a terrifying mixture of fear and accusation. "Why didn't you tell us?" she hissed. Her voice was trembling. "Why would you do that without asking your father, without—" Layla, that is an obscene amount of money. Where did you get that kind of money? I worked for it. I said, I have been working for it for 10 years. Dylan was standing by the television. His presentation was still projecting behind him a pixelated avatar smiling vacantly. The joy on his face had evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard sneer. He looked at his slides, then at me, and the comparison clearly burned him alive. He had just begged for $150,000. I had just dropped $2.6 million on a table like it was pocket change. So that is it, Dylan said. He laughed, a short, ugly sound. You are dealing drugs now. Or did you find some married partner at the firm to sleep with? Who did you screw to get that apartment? Layla. The air left my lungs, Dylan Elaine cried out. But she didn't look at him with anger. She looked at him with pity. She turned to me, her eyes pleading. He didn't mean that. He is just stressed. He's been working so hard on this pitch. Layla, you know how sensitive he is. He meant it. I said. I stood up. My legs felt solid. For the first time all day, I did not feel like a ghost. I felt like a monument. Let us talk about who paid for what, I said. My voice was calm, terrifyingly calm. When Dylan was 18, you bought him a BMW because you said he needed reliable transportation to find himself. He totaled it 3 months later. You bought him another one. When I was 18, I worked double shifts at the library to buy my own textbooks. Layla, stop it, Martin warned. His face was turning a dark shade of red, matching the stain on the table. When Dylan maxed out his credit cards at 25, trying to start that DJ business, you paid off $18,000 of debt because you didn't want his credit score to be ruined. I continued. When I was 25, I was eating instant oatmeal for dinner so I could max out my 401k. You have funded 3 failed startups for him. You paid his rent for 5 years. I have never asked you for a single cent since the day I left for college. Martin slammed his hand on the table. The silverware rattled. Enough, he shouted. He stood up, looming over the ruined tablecloth. He pointed a finger at me. You come into this house, he shouted, shaking with rage. You come here, where we are trying to support your brother's dreams, and you throw your money in our faces. You think you are better than him, is that it? You think because you have a fancy apartment you can humiliate this family. I did not humiliate anyone. I said, I just told you where I live. You are mocking him, Elaine sobbed. She was clutching Dylan's arm now, protecting her cub from the big bad sister. Look at him, Layla. You have hurt his feelings. He is trying to build something, and you just wanted to show off. Apologize, Martin said. His voice dropped to a growl. Apologize to your brother right now for being arrogant. Apologize for ruining this dinner. I looked at them. I looked at Dylan, who was watching me with a smirk hidden behind his mother's shoulder. He knew he had won. He always won. He could insult me, degrade me, minimize my entire existence to a sexual transaction, and they would still demand that I bow down to him. I looked at the wine stain. It was dripping off the edge of the table now, pooling on the beige carpet. It was ugly. It was permanent. No amount of scrubbing was going to get that out. I thought about the penthouse. I thought about the floor-to-ceiling windows looking out over Manhattan. I thought about the silence of that apartment, a silence that I owned, a silence that I had paid for with my own sweat and blood. They wanted the old Layla, the Layla who kept the peace, the Layla who absorbed the shock so the family structure wouldn't crack. They wanted the strong one to carry the burden one more time. I looked Martin in the eye. No, I said. The word hung in the air, heavier than the humidity, sharper than the knife next to my plate. I am not apologizing. I said, and for the first time in my life, I picked up my purse, turned my back on the 3 of them, and walked toward the door. I could hear Elaine gasping behind me, but I didn't stop. I had just bought a mirror that showed me exactly who they were, and I was done pretending I didn't see the reflection. The silence in my Tribeca penthouse was different from the silence in Colorado, in Denver. The silence was heavy, loaded with things that were screaming to be said but never were. Here, 20 stories above the street, the silence was expensive. It was crisp. It smelled of fresh paint and the river wind rattling against the double-paned glass. I had returned to New York 2 days early. I had changed my flight in the Uber on the way to the airport, leaving my parents and Dylan to clean up the wine stain on the carpet. Now, standing in the middle of my living room, surrounded by unopened moving boxes, I felt like a squatter. I looked at the high ceilings and the marble kitchen island, and a voice in my head, a voice that sounded suspiciously like my mother, whispered that I did not belong here. It whispered that I was an imposter, a fraud who had stepped out of line. I pushed a box marked "Kitchen" aside and sat down at my dining table. It was the only piece of furniture I had unpacked, a long slab of walnut wood that looked lonely in the vast space. I opened my laptop. At work, I am known for my due diligence. When Westward Orion looks at a company, I am the one who tears apart their balance sheets. I find the hidden debts. I find the inflated assets. I find the bodies buried in the footnotes. Tonight, I was going to audit the hardest company I had ever faced. I was going to audit the Hartley family. I opened a blank Excel spreadsheet. I typed the file name, Family Transfers, Hartley. My fingers hovered over the keys. This felt like a violation. It felt like I was breaking a sacred covenant of family privacy. But then I remembered Dylan's sneer. I remembered the question about who I had slept with to afford this apartment. I remembered the red wine dripping like blood onto the floor. I typed the headers for the columns: date, amount, recipient, stated reason. Then, I opened a new browser tab and navigated to the login page of my parents' primary bank account. 3 years ago, my father had given me the login credentials. He had been struggling to reconcile his tax documents and had asked me, the finance daughter, to help him organize his statements. He had never changed the password. He likely assumed I had forgotten it, or perhaps he simply assumed that I, the good daughter, would never use it for anything other than serving him. I typed in the password. The screen loaded. Welcome, Martin and Elaine. I navigated to the Statements tab. I did not just want this year, I wanted everything. I started downloading PDF statements going back 10 years. The little circular icon spun, churning through the data, retrieving the digital footprint of a decade of favoritism. I began with the most recent month and worked backward. The first entry I found was dated 3 weeks ago. A transfer of $7,500 to Dylan Hartley. I paused. $7,500. I closed my eyes and tried to remember the conversation from 3 weeks ago. I had been on a call with my mother. She had told me Dylan was going through a rough patch with his landlord. Something about a misunderstanding regarding the security deposit. She had made it sound like a minor bureaucratic error. I typed it into the spreadsheet. Date November 2nd. Amount $7,500. Recipient Dylan. Reason rent crisis. Landlord dispute. I kept scrolling. August. A transfer of $9,200. I stared at the screen. $9,000. That was a down payment on a car. That was a student loan payoff. I checked the date against my calendar. In August, Dylan had posted photos on Instagram from a villa in Tuscany. He had captioned it, "Finding my muse. The architecture speaks to the soul." I had liked that photo. I had commented, "Enjoy the inspiration." I had assumed he was staying in a hostel or couch surfing. I typed, date August 14th, amount $9,200. Recipient Dylan. Reason creative trip to find artistic inspiration. I scrolled back further. The year before, $12,000. The memo line on the digital check image read, "Bean Scene Capital." I laughed out loud. It was a harsh, dry sound in the empty apartment. The bean scene. That was Dylan's specialty coffee startup. He was going to roast beans using solar power. He had bought an industrial roaster that he never hooked up. He sold the machine for scrap metal 6 months later. I entered the data. Amount $12,000. Reason rescue of specialty coffee. Startup. I fell into a rhythm. It was the same rhythm I used at the office when I was building a case against a bad investment. Click, verify, type, enter. The numbers began to blur, but the total at the bottom of the spreadsheet kept ticking upward. It was a counter of my own neglect. $50,000. I found a transfer for a credit card payoff. The time Dylan bought everyone drinks at his birthday party and put it on his Amex. $85,000. I found a series of payments to a mechanic for a vintage motorcycle Dylan had bought, crashed, and then paid to have restored before selling it at a loss. $120,000. My chest felt tight. I had to stand up and walk to the window. I looked out at the lights of Jersey City across the water. I remembered the winter I was 24. I was walking to work in snow because I did not want to pay for a cab. My boots had a hole in the sole. I had glued it shut with superglue. That same winter, I saw a transfer on the screen for $3,000 for a bespoke wool coat for Dylan. I remembered that coat. He had worn it to Christmas. He told me he got it at a sample sale. He lied. He looked me in the eye, saw my wet, cold feet, and he lied. I went back to the computer. I was not sad anymore. I was cold. I was investigating a crime scene, and the victim was my own sense of reality. $210,000. I created a second tab at the bottom of the sheet. I named it Comparison, Son versus Daughter. I started a column for myself. I searched for transfers to Layla Bennett. I found a check for $50 for my birthday 4 years ago. I found a transfer of $200 when I graduated with my master's degree. I found nothing else. Column A, Dylan, tuition support, rent assistance, legal fees for a parking dispute. Medical bills he didn't want to file insurance for. Column B. Layla, 000. My phone buzzed on the table. It was a text message from my mother. Elaine, Layla. Please pick up. Your father is beside himself. You made Dylan feel so useless tonight. He is fragile. Layla. You know that. We have to be gentler with him. Please, just be the bigger person. You can afford to be gracious. I stared at the words. Be the bigger person. That was the code. It meant, you are strong enough to be hurt, so let us hurt you. It meant, your success is a buffer that allows us to fail him. I did not text back. I called her. Hello. Elaine's voice was breathless, anxious. Layla. Oh, thank God. Are you okay? We were so worried when you left. I'm looking at the bank statements. Mom, I said. There was a pause on the line. A long, heavy silence. What Elaine asked. Her voice dropped an octave. I am looking at the last 10 years of transfers. I said, I see the trip to Italy. I see the coffee business. I see the rent. I see everything. Layla. You shouldn't be looking at that, she said, her voice rising in panic. That is private. We gave you access to help with taxes, not to spy on us. Why did you lie to me, I asked. You told me he won a grant for the art trip. You told me he had investors for the coffee shop. We didn't want to upset you, she said. We knew you would be jealous. Jealous, I asked. I am not jealous of the money. Mom, I am jealous of the fact that you allow him to fail while you demand that I succeed. Elaine sighed. A sound of deep, martyred exhaustion. Layla, listen to me. You are different. You have always been fine. From the time you were 6 years old. You could tie your own shoes. Dylan needs help. The world eats people like him alive. So you feed me to him, I asked. No, Elaine cried. That is not it. Look, we see you as our retirement plan. Okay, you are the rock. We invested in you by raising you to be independent. We invest in him because he needs it to survive. You are always fine. Layla, you don't need help. My finger was already hovering over the record button on my laptop's voice memo app. I had pressed it the moment she started talking. I see you as our retirement plan. She had said it. She had actually said it out loud. I was not a daughter. I was a 401k with a heartbeat. I was an insurance policy against their bad investment in their son. I have to go. Mom, I said, wait, Layla, don't hang up. I ended the call. I saved the recording. I named the file Confession, Retirement Plan. I went back to the spreadsheet. I felt a strange sense of detachment. I was building a dossier. This was not just a temper tantrum anymore. This was evidence. My phone buzzed again. A voicemail this time. It was my father. I played it on speaker, letting his booming, authoritative voice fill the empty penthouse. Layla, this is Martin. Look, things got heated. We all said things, but I have been thinking, now that we know you are doing so well, Westward Orion is a big firm. You must have connections. Dylan needs stability. If you could get him an interview, maybe a junior analyst role or something in marketing. He just needs a foot in the door. He needs a steady income so we can stop helping him so much. Think about it. It would heal the family. Call me." I stared at the phone in disbelief. He wanted me to hire him. He wanted me to take the man who had just accused me of prostituting myself for an apartment and give him a job at one of the most competitive equity firms in Manhattan. He wanted me to put my professional reputation on the line for a man who made PowerPoint presentations in Comic Sans. I did not delete the voicemail. I exported it. I saved it to a folder I created on my desktop named Evidence. I went back to the Excel sheet. I was reaching the end of the 10 years. I typed in the final entries. A bail bond from 5 years ago that I never knew about. A settlement for a broken lease. My phone lit up one more time. I braced myself for another attack, but the name on the screen was Tessa. "Tessa, I am driving home. I just wanted to say, I saw it. I have always seen it. It is unfair. Layla, it is sick. I heard what Dylan said about the apartment. If you need someone to confirm what really happened on your 18th birthday versus his, I am ready. I remember the BMW. I remember you crying in the bathroom because they forgot to order a cake until 9 p.m. Just let me know." I felt a lump form in my throat. It was hard and painful. For the first time in 32 years, I had a witness. I was not crazy. I was not imagining the disparity. I typed a reply. "Thank you. Tessa, I might need you." I turned back to the spreadsheet. I highlighted the column for Dylan. I clicked the auto-sum button. The number appeared in bold black text at the bottom of the screen. $452,000. I sat back in my chair. The number seemed to vibrate. $452,000 transferred from my parents to my brother over the last 11 years. That was almost $500,000. That was a house. That was a retirement fund. That was the price of their love for him. I looked at my column. $9,450. Most of it was grouped around Christmas and birthdays, usually in checks of $100 or $200. The ratio was 45-1. I looked at the screen until my eyes burned. The sun was beginning to rise over the East River, casting a pale, gray light into the apartment. I was exhausted, but I was also awake in a way I had never been before. The ambiguity was gone. There was no more wondering if I was being too sensitive. There was no more wondering if they loved us equally in different ways. The math did not lie. The ledger was closed. I saved the Excel file. I backed it up to the cloud. I backed it up to an external hard drive. I stood up and walked to the kitchen. I poured a glass of water. My hand was shaking, just a little, not from fear, from the adrenaline of truth. They had spent $452,000 keeping him afloat, and they had charged me the cost of my own soul to pay for it. I took a sip of water. It was cool and clean. I was done paying. It was a Tuesday morning, the kind of sharp, bright November day where the sunlight hits the glass towers of Manhattan and makes the entire city look like it is made of gold and ambition. I was sitting in the main conference room on the 42nd floor of Westward Orion Equity Group. We were in the middle of a high-stakes strategy meeting regarding the acquisition of a mid-sized logistics firm in Chicago. The air in the room was cool and smelled of expensive coffee and dry erase markers. My phone, which was face down on the mahogany table, vibrated. I ignored it. It vibrated again. Long, insistent buzzes. I glanced down. It was the internal line for building security. My stomach tightened. Security never called the direct lines of directors unless the building was on fire or there was a threat. I raised a hand, signaling an apology to Graham Lockwood, our managing partner, who was midway through dissecting the logistics firm's debt structure. "I am sorry. Graham," I said, "I need to take this. It is building security." Graham nodded, his expression unreadable. "Take it." I picked up the phone and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window, turning my back to the room. "Ms. Bennett," the head of security said. His voice was tight. "We have a situation in the lobby. There is a man here. He says he is your brother. He is distressed." "Distressed," I repeated, He is screaming, "Ms. Bennett, he is demanding to see you. He says you have stolen something from him. He is causing a scene in front of the elevators. Do you want us to remove him? Or do you want to come down?" I closed my eyes for a second. I could see the reflection of the conference room in the glass, my colleagues, the charts, the life I had built brick by brick, and down there, 42 floors below, was the wrecking ball. "I will come down," I said. "Do not let him up." I hung up and turned back to the room. My face felt cold. I knew exactly what mask I was wearing. It was the same one I wore when a deal was going south. The mask of absolute, impenetrable calm. "I apologize," I said to the room. "There is a personal emergency downstairs. I will be back in 10 minutes. Please continue without me." I walked to the elevator bank. My heels clicked rhythmically against the marble floor. Click, click, click. With every floor I descended, the professional armor I wore felt heavier. When the elevator doors slid open in the lobby, the sound hit me first. It was not the usual hush of corporate traffic. It was a raw, jagged shouting. "She is a thief." The voice was unmistakable. It was Dylan. I stepped out. The lobby of our building is a cavernous space of white stone and modern art, designed to intimidate. Dylan looked small and chaotic in the middle of it. He was wearing a coat that looked like he had slept in it, his hair wild, his face flushed a blotchy red. He was pointing a finger at the receptionist, a young woman who looked terrified. "She works here," Dylan screamed. "Layla Bennett. Tell her to come down here and face me. She owes me that money. That is my money." 2 security guards were flanking him, hands hovering near their belts, trying to de-escalate without touching him. A group of clients from a Japanese bank were standing near the turnstiles. Watching with wide eyes, I walked straight toward him. I did not run. I did not hurry. I moved with the deliberate slowness of a predator. "Dylan," I said. He spun around. When he saw me, his eyes widened, manic and bright. "There she is," he shouted, gesturing at me as if presenting a villain to a jury. "The Princess of Wall Street." "Look at her." I stopped 10 feet away from him. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I swiped to the camera, switched it to video mode, and hit record. I held it up, chest high, steady. "I am recording this. Dylan," I said. My voice was level, loud enough to be heard, but not shouting. "You are in my place of business. You are trespassing. If you do not turn around and walk out of those doors in 10 seconds, I will ask these officers to call the New York Police Department." He laughed. It was a wet, ugly sound. "Call them," he yelled. "Go ahead. Tell them how you stole our grandfather's money. Tell them how you bought a $2.6 million penthouse with the inheritance that was supposed to be mine." The words echoed off the marble walls. The clients by the turnstiles were whispering. Secretaries returning from coffee runs stopped to watch. I felt a flash of heat climb up my neck, but I forced my hand to stay steady. There was no inheritance. "Dylan," I said, "I bought that apartment with my earnings." "Liar," he screamed. He took a step toward me. The security guard stepped in, blocking his path. He slammed his hand against the chest of the larger guard. "You manipulated him. You tricked Grandpa into changing the will before he died. That money was for the firstborn son. You stole my life, Layla." "You are living in my apartment, sir," the guard said, his voice dropping to a command. "You need to step back. Now." Dylan struggled against them. He looked at me over the guard's shoulder. His face twisted with a hatred so pure it looked like love turned inside out. "I am going to tell everyone," he shrieked. "I am going to go to the papers. I will tell them who you really are. You are a fraud. You are a thief. Remove him." I said to the guard. The guards moved. They grabbed Dylan by the arms. He thrashed, his heels skidding on the polished floor. "Get off me." "Do you know who I am? I am an artist. She is the criminal. She is the one you should be arresting." They dragged him toward the revolving doors. He was still screaming my name as they pushed him out onto the street. I watched through the glass as he stumbled on the sidewalk, turned back to spit at the building, and then disappeared into the crowd of pedestrians. I stood there for a moment. The lobby was dead silent. Everyone was looking at me. The receptionist, the clients, The delivery guys. I lowered my phone. I stopped the recording. I saved the video. I walked over to the receptionist. I'm sorry you had to experience that. Sarah, I said, if he comes back, do not engage. Call the police immediately. I turned and walked back to the elevators. I did not look at anyone else. I pressed the button for the 42nd floor. I stood in the metal box as it shot upward, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird, but my face in the mirrored wall remained completely still. When I got back to my desk, I did not go back to the meeting. I sat down and connected my phone to my computer. I transferred the video file. I opened a new email. I typed the recipient, Janet Lowell, Head of Human Resources. Subject: workplace harassment. Security incident. Layla Bennett. I attached the video. I typed a summary. Janet. Attached is a video of an incident that occurred in the lobby at 10:15 this morning. The individual is my brother, Dylan Hartley. This is the third time this week he has attempted to contact me. He has called the main line twice using false names. Today, he trespassed and caused a disturbance. I am formally reporting this to ensure the safety of the staff and to document his behavior. I apologize for the disruption. I hit send. 10 minutes later, my office line rang. It was Janet. Layla, she said, can you come to my office? Graham is here too. I walked to the corner office. Graham Lockwood was sitting on the leather sofa, holding a glass of water. Janet was behind her desk, looking grim. Sit down. Layla, Graham said. I sat. I kept my back straight. We watched the video. Janet said. I nodded. I am mortified. I said, it will not happen again. I will take measures to stop, Graham said. He held up a hand. Layla, you do not need to apologize for being the victim of harassment. He leaned forward. Graham is a man who has fired people for typos. He is a man who values efficiency above all else. But in that moment, I saw something else in his eyes, a fierce, tribal protectiveness of his assets. And I was the asset. He is alleging that you stole money. Graham said, is there any validity to a legal claim regarding an estate gnome? I said, my grandfather died 7 years ago. There was a small inheritance. It was distributed then. My brother spent his share in 6 months. There is no other money. He is unwell. He cannot accept that I earned the money for my apartment, so he has invented a narrative where I must have stolen it. Graham nodded. He looked at Janet. From this point forward, Graham said, his voice hard, if anyone from your family contacts this firm, they go through legal. If he shows up again, we arrest him. We do not just remove him. We press charges for trespassing and harassment. Westward Orion protects its own. Janet pushed a folder across the desk. Our internal counsel, David, took a look at the situation based on what you told me last week about the phone calls. Janet said, he recommends you file for a restraining order. A restraining order, I repeated. The words tasted like ash. Layla. Janet said gently, what you are describing, the demands for money, the public humiliation, the stalking at your workplace. This has a name. It is called financial and emotional family abuse. It is a form of coercive control. Abuse. I had never used that word. Abuse was what happened to people who showed up with bruises. Abuse was physical. What happened to me was just family duty. It was just the price of being the strong one. But as I looked at the two of them, my boss and my HR director, I realized they were treating this with more gravity than my parents ever had. To my parents, Dylan's screaming was just passion. To these professionals, it was a threat. You do not owe them your sacrifice. Layla, Graham said, you earned your seat at this table. Do not let them pull you out of your chair. I walked back to my office feeling a strange mixture of shame and validation. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was the family group chat. Elaine Dillon just called me. He is sobbing. He says you had security throw him out on the street like a criminal. He just wanted to talk to you. Layla, he is your brother. How could you be so cold? He says people were laughing at him. You have humiliated him in front of your fancy colleagues. Are you even human anymore? I read the text. Are you even human anymore? I did not reply. I did not type out a defense. I took a screenshot. I saved the image. I dragged it into the folder marked Evidence. A moment later, a separate message popped up from Tessa. Tessa, do not look at Facebook. I stared at the message. My fingers hovered over the keys. Layla. What did he do, Tessa? He posted a long rant. He is saying you tricked your grandfather into signing a new will on his deathbed while he was medicated. He is saying you forged signatures. He is tagging everyone, family, friends, people from high school. I felt the blood drain from my face. This was not just screaming in a lobby. This was libel. This was a direct attack on my character, on the integrity that my entire career was built upon. Tessa, I already reported the post for false information. I commented on it too. I wrote that Grandpa died in a hospice facility, and you were in London for work that entire month. But Layla, people are sharing it. The ones who always hated that you succeeded. They are loving this. I put the phone down. I worked until 8 that night. I did not look at social media. I focused on the logistics acquisition. I focused on debt-to-equity ratios. I focused on things that made sense, things that followed rules. When I got home to the penthouse, the city was dark. I did not turn on the lights. I walked to the living room and stood before the massive wall of glass. Manhattan was spread out below me, a grid of electricity and steel. I looked at my reflection in the glass. I looked like a woman who had everything, but I knew the truth. I was under siege. For years. I had thought that if I just gave them enough money, enough silence, enough apologies, they would eventually let me be. I thought if I succeeded enough, they would be proud. I was wrong. My success was not a gift to them. It was an insult. To Dylan. My penthouse was not a home I had bought. It was a monument to his own failure. And he would burn it down just to stop seeing the shadow it cast on him. If I did nothing, he would escalate. He would show up at client dinners. He would email the partners. He would drag my name through the mud until I was as dirty as he felt. I walked to the kitchen island. I opened my laptop. I was done being the daughter. I was done being the sister. Tonight, I was the plaintiff. I opened my email client. I did not use my work address. I used my personal one. I typed the address of a law firm I had researched on the train ride home, a firm that specialized in high-conflict family litigation and defamation, subject consultation regarding family harassment, money, and reputation. I began to type, to whom it may concern. My name is Layla Bennett. I am a 32-year-old financial executive. I am writing to retain counsel regarding an escalating situation involving harassment, defamation, and financial extortion by immediate family members. I have video evidence of workplace intrusion. I have 10 years of bank records documenting financial disparity. I have digital records of libelous statements posted on social media. I am done negotiating. I am ready to litigate. Please let me know your earliest availability. Regards, Layla Bennett. I pressed send. The swoosh sound of the email leaving my outbox was the loudest thing I had heard all day. It sounded like a gavel coming down. The silence that followed was heavy. But for the first time, it was not empty. It was the silence of a war room before the first shot is fired. The email arrived in my inbox on a Thursday morning with a subject line that was so dripping with false piety it almost made me laugh. A time for healing. That was what my mother had titled it. The body of the email was brief, written in a font that tried to look like handwriting, inviting me to a family Zoom call on Friday night to clear the air and restore the bonds of affection that have been frayed. It was not an invitation. It was a summons to a court-martial. I forwarded the email to Tessa immediately. Her reply came back within 30 seconds. It is an ambush. Layla, they invited Aunt Marjorie, Uncle Ted, and even Cousin Sarah from Ohio. They are gathering a jury. I knew she was right. My parents worked on the principle of public shame. They believed that if they could surround me with enough family members, people who only knew the sanitized version of our history, they could pressure me into submission. They wanted me to feel small. They wanted me to feel like the ungrateful daughter who was breaking her mother's heart while the whole clan watched. I accepted the invitation, but I did not prepare an apology. I prepared a presentation. On Friday night, I set my laptop on my dining table. I positioned it carefully, behind me, through the floor-to-ceiling glass. The Manhattan skyline was a glittering wall of light. The Freedom Tower punctured the dark sky, and the lights of the bridges reflected off the Hudson River. I wanted them to see it. I wanted them to see exactly what I had built. I wanted the backdrop of my life to be the silent evidence of everything they said I did not deserve. I poured myself a glass of sparkling water. I put on a tailored black blazer. I checked my lighting. I looked like I was about to anchor the evening news. I clicked the link. The screen filled with the grid of faces that constituted my bloodline. In the center square, occupying the position of authority, were Martin and Elaine. They were sitting on the beige sofa in the Colorado rental, looking grave and solemn. My mother was wearing a high-necked blouse and clutching a tissue, anticipating the tears she planned to shed. My father had his arms crossed, his face set in a mask of disappointed patriarch. To their left was Dylan. He was back in his apartment, the one my parents paid for. He was wearing a gray hoodie, the hood down, his hair purposely messy to suggest deep emotional turmoil. He looked like a tragic poet who had been wronged by a cruel patron. Around them were the spectators: Aunt Marjorie, peering over her reading glasses; Uncle Ted, looking bored and drinking a beer; Cousin Sarah, holding a baby. They were the audience for the evening's performance. "We are all here," Martin said. His voice was heavy, resonant. "Thank you everyone for joining. We are here because this family is in crisis. We are here because my son, Dylan, has been deeply hurt. And we need to find a path forward. He did not say hello to me. He did not ask how I was." "Layla," Elaine said, her voice trembling just the right amount. "We just want to fix this. We want to be a family again." I sat perfectly still. I did not smile. I simply nodded. "I think it is best if Dylan speaks first." Martin said, "He has prepared some thoughts." Dylan unfolded a piece of paper. He did not look at the camera. He looked down at his hands, performing humility. "I never wanted it to come to this," Dylan read. His voice was shaky. "I have always looked up to my sister. But this week I was treated like a criminal. I was thrown out of a building onto the cold street. I was humiliated in front of strangers. And why? Because I asked for what was fair." He paused for effect. Aunt Marjorie made a sympathetic clucking sound. "Layla has taken everything," Dylan continued, his voice rising with rehearsed passion. "She manipulated our grandfather. She took the inheritance that was meant to secure my future, the capital that was supposed to launch my art, my vision. She bought a penthouse with money that should have been shared. She has stolen my legacy, and the worst part is the emotional damage. I feel erased. I feel like my own sister has erased me." He wiped a non-existent tear from his eye. Elaine reached out and touched the screen, as if she could comfort him through the internet. "Oh, my poor boy," she whispered. Martin cleared his throat. He looked directly into the camera lens, staring me down. "You have heard your brother, Layla," Martin said. "The pain is real. The injustice is real. We cannot change the past, but we can correct the balance." He leaned forward. "Here is what is going to happen," he said. "You are going to apologize to Dylan. You are going to apologize for the scene at your office, and you are going to apologize for the selfishness you have displayed. And then, we are going to discuss a financial settlement. You are sitting on a $2.6 million asset. It is only fair, it is only family justice that you liquidate a portion of your other holdings to fund Dylan's seed round. He needs $150,000 to restart his life. You will provide that. That is the cost of reinstatement in this family." The room was silent. The relatives watched, waiting for my submission. They expected the Layla, they knew the quiet one, the one who swallowed her pride to keep the peace. I looked at the grid of faces. I felt absolutely nothing. No fear, no guilt, just a cold, clinical clarity. "Are you finished?" I asked. Martin frowned. "Excuse me. If you are finished presenting your case, I would like to present the rebuttal." I said. I did not wait for his permission. I moved my mouse to the bottom of the screen and clicked the green button that said Share Screen. I selected the window containing the spreadsheet I had created 2 nights ago. The file named Family Transfers, Hartley. The grid of faces shrank to the side, replaced by the stark, brutal reality of the data. "What is this?" Elaine asked sharply. "Layla, what are you doing?" "This is a ledger," I said. My voice was calm, the voice I used when explaining a failed merger to a board of directors. Since we are discussing fairness, and since we are discussing who has stolen from whom, I thought it would be helpful to look at the actual numbers. I highlighted the first block of rows. "This is the year Dylan turned 18. I said, "You will see a purchase for a BMW 3 Series, $38,000. You will see higher insurance premiums for a male driver under 25. You will see $3,000 in repairs after he backed it into a mailbox." I moved the cursor to the next column. "This is the year I turned 18. I said, "You will see a check for $200 for textbooks. That is the entire entry." I scrolled down. The numbers whizzed by. A blur of financial favoritism. "Here we have the bail money from 5 years ago." I said, $5,000. "Here we have the settlement with his former landlord, $7,500. Here is the credit card consolidation, $18,000. I paused at a specific entry, and here, I said, pointing my mouse at the row, is the year of our shared birthday party, the one where we celebrated Dylan's 25th and my 23rd. You will see a charge for $4,000 for a venue rental and a DJ. That was for Dylan. I heard a gasp. It came from cousin Sarah. I remember that. Sarah said she had unmuted herself. I remember that party. There was an open bar. Yes, I said. And does anyone recall what happened for my birthday that same year? There was a silence. Then, Tessa spoke up. Her voice was clear and sharp. "We went to Applebee's," Tessa said, "and Layla paid for her own appetizers because Uncle Martin forgot his wallet." I saw Martin's face turn a deep, purple shade of rage. "Stop this," he shouted. "Stop this immediately. This is private family business. You made it public when you invited an audience. Martin," I said. I scrolled to the bottom of the sheet. I highlighted the total sum. The number was bold and black. $452,000. I read aloud. "That is the total amount of money transferred from Martin and Elaine Hartley to Dylan Hartley over the last 11 years. I moved the cursor to my column. $9,450. I said, "That is my total, primarily consisting of $50 birthday checks and 1 contribution to my graduation gown." I stopped sharing the screen. The grid of faces returned. The atmosphere in the digital room had shifted. It was no longer a tribunal. It was a crime scene, and the weapon was math. Aunt Marjorie was adjusting her glasses, looking at Martin with a mixture of confusion and judgment. Uncle Ted had put down his beer. You made those numbers up." Elaine stammered. Her face was pale. "You are twisting things. We helped him because he needed it. He is an artist. He is sensitive. $450,000 is not help." "Mom," I said, "it is a salary. You have been employing him to be your son." "How dare you?" Dylan screamed. He leaned into his camera, his face distorted by the lens. "You are keeping score. That is what is wrong with you. You think love is a transaction." "No." I said, "I think love is not supposed to be a theft. You accused me of stealing your inheritance. I just proved that you have already received it. You spent your inheritance in installments for the last decade. You just didn't notice because you didn't have to work for it." Martin slammed his fist on the table in Colorado. The camera shook. "You are an ungrateful, arrogant girl," he shouted. "After everything we did for you, we gave you freedom. We let you be independent. You didn't let me be independent," I said. "You abandoned me financially so you could afford to enable him." I looked straight at my mother. I saw the fear in her eyes. She knew what was coming. She knew I knew. "Mom," I said. My voice dropped, becoming very quiet. "Do you remember the phone call we had 3 days ago? Do you remember what you said when I asked why you help him and not me?" Elaine froze. She looked like a deer caught in the headlights of a semi-truck. I didn't say anything. She whispered, "You said I was your retirement plan." I said, "You said," and I quote, "We see you as our retirement plan. You invest in him because he needs it to survive. You assume I am fine, so you take from me to give to him." The silence that followed was absolute. It was heavier than the silence in the penthouse. It was the silence of a secret being ripped out into the open air. Aunt Marjorie gasped audibly. She looked at Elaine. "Elaine, did you really say that?" Elaine's face crumbled. She went from shock to fury in a split second. "You are twisting my words," she shrieked. Her voice cracked, high and desperate. "You are trying to make us look like monsters. We just wanted everyone to be okay." "You are strong, Layla. You were always the strong one. Why can't you just be strong for your brother? Because I am done paying for his weakness." I looked at Dylan. He was not screaming anymore. He was staring at the screen, looking at the faces of our relatives, seeing the shift in their eyes. He was seeing his narrative collapse. He was seeing the victim card dissolve in the acid of the truth. "This meeting is not about healing." I looked at my father. "This meeting is about finding a way to make me pay for Dylan's next failure so you don't have to. You brought these people here to shame me into opening my checkbook." I reached for the mouse. It didn't work. I said, "Layla, wait," Tessa said. Her voice was the only kind thing in the darkness. "You made your point. You really did. Thank you." "Tessa," I said. I looked at Martin and Elaine one last time. They looked small. They looked like two people who had spent their lives building a shrine to a false god, and they were terrified of the empty space that would be left when it fell. "I am leaving this meeting," I said, "and I am leaving this dynamic." "Layla, do not you dare hang up on your father," Martin bellowed. He was standing up now, pointing a finger at the screen. "Powerless. From today on," I said, my voice steady as steel. "If you want to talk about money, or inheritance, or apologies, you can speak to my lawyer. Do not call my office, do not come to my building, and do not expect me to pay for the electricity in the house you are renting." But Layla Elaine cried out, "We are family." I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had brought her own silverware to an Airbnb, but couldn't bring herself to protect her daughter. "I know," I said. "That is why it costs so much." I moved the cursor over the red button that said, "Leave meeting." I did not hesitate. I clicked it. The window closed. The voices were cut off. The screaming faces vanished. I was back in my penthouse. The room was quiet. The only light came from the city outside, the millions of strangers living their lives in the grid. I sat there for a moment, staring at the blank desktop of my computer. My heart was beating slow and strong. I had just fired my family. And for the first time in my life, the silence didn't feel like loneliness. It felt like peace. The internet does not care about truth, but occasionally, in its hunger for content, it accidentally stumbles upon justice. It happened on a Wednesday morning, 3 days after the Zoom call that had severed my ties with the family. I was at my desk, reviewing a term sheet for a logistics acquisition. When I noticed my phone screen lighting up, it was not a call or a text. It was a notification from Twitter, then another, then 10 more. They were cascading down the lock screen like a digital waterfall. I picked up the phone. My stomach turned over. I had been tagged in a post by a user I did not know. Someone with a handle involving crypto and cartoons. The caption read, "Is this your brother? This guy is losing his mind in Tribeca. Inheritance meltdown rich kids." Below the caption was a video. I pressed play. The footage was shaky, clearly filmed by someone holding a phone at hip height, likely a courier or a visitor waiting in the lobby. But the audio was crystal clear, there, framed against the pristine white marble and the abstract bronze sculpture of the Westward Orion lobby, was Dylan. The video must have been from the previous week, the day security dragged him out. He looked deranged. His coat was half falling off his shoulder. His hair was a bird's nest. He was pointing a shaking finger at the receptionist, his face contorted in a mask of pure, toddler-like rage. "She stole my inheritance," Dylan screamed in the video. "That money belongs to the firstborn son. She is a thief." The video cut to the security guards grabbing his arms. Dylan went limp, dragging his heels, shrieking my name. Layla Bennett. You owe me. You owe me that life. I watched it twice. My hands were cold. My first instinct was nausea. This was my private humiliation. The moment I had tried so hard to contain within the professional walls of my office, and now it was being broadcast to the world. The video already had 45,000 views. I scrolled down to the comments. Imagine being 30 years old and screaming about allowance in a lobby. The entitlement is strong with this one. Wait, is that the NFT guy? I recognize him from a failed rug pull last year? Then I saw the memes. Someone had already taken a screenshot of Dylan's face mouth wide open, eyes squeezed shut in a tantrum, and applied a filter that made him look like a crying baby holding a rattle. The caption overlaid on the image was, "When mommy says you have to pay your own rent." I felt exposed. I felt as though the walls of my penthouse had turned to glass. I had spent my entire career building a reputation for discretion, for steely competence, and now I was a hashtag. My office door opened. It was not my assistant. It was Patricia Hale, the attorney I had retained the night of the Zoom call. Patricia is a woman who wears suits that cost more than Dylan's car, and she has a smile that is terrifying because it never quite reaches her eyes unless she smells blood. She was holding her tablet. "You have seen it," Patricia said. It was not a question. "Yes," I said. "I am drafting an email to the platform to have it taken down. It is a violation of privacy. It is humiliating." Patricia walked over to my desk and placed her hand over mine, stopping my typing. "Stop," she said. "Do not take it down." I looked at her, shocked. "Patricia, he is screaming my name. He is calling me a thief." "Exactly," Patricia said. Her voice was calm, almost delighted. "Layla, do not you understand what he just did? We are preparing for a potential lawsuit regarding defamation and harassment. The hardest thing to prove in family court is often the volatility of the aggressor. Judges like to think family disputes are just two people having a disagreement." She tapped the screen where Dylan's face was frozen in a scream. "He just gave us the smoking gun," she said. "He performed his instability for a global audience. We do not have to describe to a jury how unhinged he is. We can just press play. This video proves he is irrational, aggressive, and motivated by a delusional sense of entitlement. It is not a humiliation. Layla, it is evidence." I looked at the video again. Through Patricia's eyes, the shame began to recede, replaced by the cold calculation of strategy. Dylan was not just embarrassing me, he was destroying his own credibility. My phone began to ring. The caller ID flashed, "Mother." I did not answer. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again immediately. "Mother." And again, Patricia nodded at the phone. "Let her leave a message. Every word is for the record." Finally, the ringing stopped. A notification for a voicemail appeared. I put the phone on speaker so Patricia could hear. Elaine's voice filled the room. She was not crying this time. She was frantic, breathless with a panic that sounded like she was the one being hunted. "Layla, have you seen what is happening? People are sending me links. Your cousin Sarah sent me a video of Dylan. They are laughing at him. Layla, the whole world is laughing at your brother." There was a pause, and then her voice shifted into that familiar, sharp tone of accusation. "You did this. You called security on him, and now he is a national joke. You have to fix this. Call the website. Tell them to take it down. Tell them it was a misunderstanding. You have money. Layla, pay them to remove it. He is locked in his room. He says his life is over." "How can you be so cruel? You are destroying the family name over a misunderstanding. Call me back immediately." The message ended. Patricia raised an eyebrow. "She thinks you control the internet," Patricia noted dryly. "And she is more concerned about his embarrassment than your safety." I saved the voicemail. I dragged it into the folder marked Evidence. 10 minutes later, an email arrived from Martin. The subject line was simply, "Honor, Layla." The circulation of this video is a stain on the Hartley name. It makes us look like low-class people who air their dirty laundry in public. You initiated this by involving security instead of handling your brother privately. It is your duty to clean this up. I expect you to issue a statement saying that the man in the video was suffering from a medical episode and that the family asks for privacy. If you do not, you are complicit in his destruction. Dad, I read it twice. The audacity was breathtaking. He wanted me to lie. He wanted me to label Dylan's greed as a medical episode to save face. I hit reply. I did not type a paragraph. I typed one sentence. All future communication must be directed to my attorney, Patricia Hale. I hit send. That afternoon, Westward Orion released an internal memo. I had been terrified of walking into the break room, terrified of the whispers. But Graham Lockwood had been true to his word. The email went to the entire staff. It did not name me, but it was clear. Westward Orion is committed to the safety and privacy of its employees. Recent harassment of a team member by external parties has been noted. Please be advised that any engagement with or circulation of media regarding the private lives of our staff is a violation of our code of conduct. We stand with our people. If you are contacted by outside parties seeking comment, refer them to legal immediately. I walked to the coffee machine later that day. A junior analyst, a young man who usually avoided eye contact with directors, looked at me. He did not smirk. He gave me a solemn nod. I saw the video. He said quietly, "My uncle is like that. I am sorry you have to deal with it." "Thank you," I said. The shame I had feared was not there. Instead, there was a strange, silent solidarity. It turned out that I was not the only person who had a Dylan in their life by Friday. The dynamic had shifted again. Tessa texted me. "Tessa, you need to check the cousin group chat, but do not say anything." She sent me screenshots. The family group chat, usually a place for sharing birthday wishes and photos of casseroles, had turned into a battlefield. Aunt Marjorie, honestly, seeing it on video, he looks dangerous. I never realized how aggressive he gets when he is told no. Uncle Ted Martin keeps saying Layla provoked him, but the guy is screaming about inheritance while she is just standing there. It does not look good. Cousin Sarah. I tried to tell Aunt Elaine that maybe Dylan needs therapy, not money, and she bit my head off. She said I was jealous of his talent. Aunt Marjorie. Talent, he has not finished a project in 10 years. Maybe Layla was right on the Zoom call. Maybe we just didn't want to see it. I stared at the screen. The cracks were forming. For decades, Martin and Elaine had controlled the narrative. They had painted Dylan as the fragile genius and me as the cold, unfeeling robot. But the video had stripped away the filter. They could not gaslight the entire extended family when the evidence was playing on loop on Twitter. Dylan, realizing he was losing the audience, decided to go nuclear. On Saturday night, Patricia sent me a link. "Do not engage." She wrote, "Just read and save." It was a Facebook post, a long, rambling manifesto posted by Dylan. He had set the privacy to public, "The truth about my sister." The title read, "Everyone is laughing at a video of me in my darkest moment." But they do not know the truth. They do not know that Layla Bennett manipulated our dying grandfather. She spent the last months of his life whispering poison in his ear, convincing him to change his will. She stole the capital that was meant to launch my art. She is not a successful investor. She is a fraud who built her career on stolen family money. And now she lives here, in a castle built on my back. Below the text, he had posted a photo. It was a photo of my penthouse building, and then a photo of me. It was a picture from my Instagram, one I had taken on the terrace, holding a glass of wine. He had captioned it, "The Face of Greed." My heart hammered against my ribs. He was doxing me. He was lying about a will that had been executed 7 years ago by a rigid estate attorney, a will where my grandfather had explicitly left the majority of his money to a dog shelter because he disliked both of his children. I called Patricia. "This is defamation," I said. My voice was shaking. "He is accusing me of elder abuse and fraud." "Yes," Patricia said, "and he just posted it in writing. He is digging his own grave." Layla. I have already preserved the post. I am contacting Facebook to have the address removed for safety. But the text. We are keeping the text. We are adding a count of libel to the suit. He is trying to destroy my career. I said, he is trying to destroy you because he cannot control you. Patricia said, but he forgets that you work in finance. You have audits. You have records. He has nothing but a story he invented. Later that night, as I sat in the dark watching the city lights, my phone buzzed with a notification from Instagram. It was a direct message from a user with no profile picture. The name was just user8829. Layla. The message read, I saw the video. I used to be friends with Dylan. We were roommates in Boulder 4 years ago. He owes me $2,000 for rent. I stared at the screen. I saw his post about the will. The stranger continued, he is lying. I have something you might want to see. He forwarded me an email from your dad a few years ago when I was threatening to take him to small claims court. He was trying to prove he was good for the money. An image loaded. It was a screenshot of an email from Martin to Dylan, dated 4 years prior. Subject rent. Mike situation, Dylan. Do not worry about Mike. I will send the check for the $2,000 on Monday. Just tell him it is coming. You do not need to stress about the future. Son, focus on your art. I know things are tight now, but remember what we discussed. Your sister is doing very well. She is the safety net. She will take care of the later part. The bulk of the estate will eventually go to you because she will not need it. She is the worker. You are the visionary. We have to protect the visionary. I read the email 3 times. She is the worker. You are the visionary. She will take care of the later part. There it was, in black and white. It was not just a feeling. It was not just my mother's slip of the tongue on the phone. It was a strategy. It was a premeditated, documented philosophy of my existence. I was bred to be the mule so he could be the show pony. I saved the image. I took a screenshot of the DM conversation. I replied to the stranger, "Thank you. You have no idea how much this helps." "No problem." The stranger replied, "He is a leech. Take him down." I closed the laptop. I walked to the window. The fear that had gripped me when I first saw the video was gone. The shame of the memes had evaporated. In their place was a cold, hard resolve. My parents had spent their lives building a fortress of lies to protect Dylan. They had sacrificed my childhood, my emotional well-being, and my financial equality to keep him safe inside that fortress. But they had made a fatal error. They had forgotten that I was the one who knew how to build things, and more importantly, I knew how to take them apart. They had brought this war to the internet, to the one place they could not control with guilt trips and family dinners. I looked at the folder on my desktop marked Evidence. It was full now. Videos, voicemails, spreadsheets, emails. I was not the little girl waiting for a slice of cake anymore. I was the CEO of my own life, and I was about to call in the debt. The arrival of my parents at Westward Orion Equity Group was not an act of love. It was a tactical invasion. It happened on a Tuesday morning, the kind of gray, drizzling New York day where the clouds hang low enough to scrape the tops of the skyscrapers. I was in my office, reviewing the quarterly projections for a renewable energy portfolio, when the internal line rang. It was the head of security again. I felt a muscle in my jaw jump, a Pavlovian response I had developed over the last week. "Ms. Bennett," the guard said. His voice was apologetic but firm. "Your parents are here. Mr. and Mrs. Hartley. They are at the front desk. They are demanding to see you. They say it is a family emergency." I closed the file on my desk. I looked at my hand. It was perfectly steady. "Do not let them up yet," I said. I hung up and dialed Patricia Hale. She picked up on the first ring. "They are downstairs." I said, "I am 2 blocks away." Patricia replied. Her voice was sharp, energized. "I will be there in 5 minutes. Do not go down there alone. Get Janet from HR. We do this by the book." I called Janet Lowell. "They are here." I told her, "I will meet you in conference room B." Janet said immediately, "The glass one." I hung up. I stood and smoothed the front of my skirt. I walked to the mirror in the corner of my office. The woman staring back at me did not look like the daughter who used to hide in her bedroom while her parents argued about credit card debt. She looked like a director of a billion-dollar equity firm. She looked like someone who could weather a storm. I went to the elevators. I waited. When the doors opened, Patricia stepped out. She was wearing a navy suit that looked like armor. She carried a leather portfolio. She nodded at me. "Game time," she said. We went to conference room B. It is known as the fishbowl because 3 of its 4 walls are floor-to-ceiling glass. It is designed for transparency. It is designed so that nothing can be hidden. "Bring them up," I told security. 3 minutes later, Martin and Elaine Hartley walked into the suite. They were dragging carry-on suitcases. They looked tired. My mother's hair was slightly frizzy from the humidity. My father was wearing his church suit, the one he saved for funerals and weddings. When they saw me standing at the head of the long mahogany table, flanked by a lawyer and a human resources executive, they stopped. They had expected a crying daughter. They found a boardroom. "Layla," my mother breathed. She took a step forward, arms open. "We just flew in. We had to see you. Please take a seat," I said. I gestured to the 2 chairs on the opposite side of the table. Martin bristled. He looked at Patricia, then at Janet. "What is this?" he asked. "We came to talk to our daughter. Why are there strangers here?" "This is Patricia Hale, my attorney," I said, "and this is Janet Lowell, the head of human resources for Westward Orion." Martin's face reddened. "This is a family matter," he said. "We are here to resolve a private conflict. We do not need lawyers. Layla, tell them to leave so we can talk." "Mr. Hartley," Patricia said. She did not stand up. She sat with her hands folded on the table, perfectly relaxed. "You are in a place of business. You have harassed your daughter at her workplace previously. You have allowed your son to trespass here. Layla has agreed to meet with you only under the condition that there are witnesses." Martin looked at me. His eyes were pleading, but underneath the pleading was the old, familiar anger. "You are turning us into enemies." "Layla," he said, "we just want the family to be whole again. You are escalating this. Please sit down." Patricia repeated. They sat. They looked small in the ergonomic leather chairs. The contrast was jarring. In their living room in Colorado, they were giants. Here, surrounded by the steel and glass of corporate Manhattan, they were just 2 visitors with bad luggage. Patricia opened her portfolio. She took out a small digital recorder. She placed it in the center of the table. "This meeting is being recorded," Patricia said. "By staying in the room, you consent to the recording. This is for the protection of all parties." Elaine stared at the device like it was a bomb. "I cannot believe this," she whispered. "Recording your own parents." I said nothing. I opened my notebook. I wrote down the date. I wrote down the time. "Let us begin," Patricia said. "You are here because you claim there is a misunderstanding regarding finances and the incident with your son. We are here because Dylan is suffering," Martin said. He leaned forward, trying to assume his patriarch voice. "He is destroyed. Layla, that video is everywhere. He cannot sleep. He cannot eat. And instead of helping him, his sister is sending us legal threats. We are sending legal notices because your son is defaming my client," Patricia said. "He is posting lies about a will that was settled 7 years ago." "He is just venting," Elaine cried out. She looked at me. "He is hurt. Layla. He feels like you left him behind. You bought that apartment, and you didn't even tell us. Do you know how that made him feel? Like he is a failure." I looked at my mother. "Is he a failure?" I asked. Elaine blinked. "What is Dylan a failure?" I asked again. My voice was low and even. "Because if the purchase of my home makes him feel like a failure, that implies that he believes he should have been able to buy it. But he cannot buy it. He cannot pay his own rent. So, is he a failure, or is he just supported by you?" "Don't you twist words with me," Martin snapped. "He has had bad luck. The economy is tough for creatives." Patricia interrupted. "Mr. Hartley," she said, "we have reviewed the bank records. Over the last decade, you have transferred $452,000 to your son. During that same period, your daughter received less than $10,000. Martin waved his hand dismissively. "So you are counting pennies now?" he asked. $400,000 is not pennies. Patricia said. It is a house. It is a retirement fund. Why is there such a disparity? Martin shifted in his seat. He looked out the glass wall at the busy office floor. Because he needs it, Martin said. His voice was gruff. Look, she is different. She has always been sharp. She gets that from my side of the family. She lands on her feet. Dylan is an artist. He feels things more deeply. He does not have the same capabilities she has. I wrote that down. He does not have the same capabilities. So you admit, Patricia said, that you punish your daughter for her competence and reward your son for his incompetence. We do not punish her, Elaine said. She sounded offended. We are proud of her. But we cannot just let Dylan go out into the world and starve. We cannot let him fail. Layla, if we didn't help him, he would be on the street. Patricia leaned forward. Did you ever ask Layla if she needed help? Patricia asked. In 10 years. Did you ever once offer her the same safety net? Elaine opened her mouth, then closed it. She looked at me. Her eyes searched my face for a sign of the little girl who used to crave her approval. She found only a director of investments. She never complained, Elaine said softly. She never asked. She was always so independent. Why would we offer money to someone who has plenty of it? So because she succeeded, she deserved less love. Patricia asked, It is not about love. Martin slammed his hand on the table. It is about survival. Layla has a penthouse. She has a 6-figure salary. Dylan has nothing. Dylan has nothing because he has never been forced to earn anything. I said. Martin turned on me. His face was red. You think you are so superior. He spat. You think because you make money. You are better than him. But let me tell you something. Layla, we raised you to be this way. We pushed you. We made you strong. And why did you do that? Patricia asked. Martin looked at her. He was losing control. The mask of the benevolent father was slipping, revealing the desperate manager of a failing family business. Because someone has to be the rock, Martin shouted. We always saw Layla as the future financial pillar of this family. We knew she would make it. And when you make it in this family, you share. You help the ones who are struggling. That is what family does. She earns enough for all of us. The room went silent. The air conditioning hummed. Outside the glass, a secretary walked by carrying a tray of coffees. Patricia let the silence hang there for 10 seconds. She wanted the words to soak into the walls. I want to be clear, Patricia said. She spoke slowly, enunciating every syllable. You are stating that you raised your daughter with the specific intent that she would become the financial provider for you and your son. You viewed her not as a child, but as an asset. Martin blinked. He seemed to realize he had walked into a trap. I didn't say asset. He mumbled. I said pillar. You said she earns enough for all of us. Patricia corrected. That implies an obligation. You believe she owes you her earnings. It is common decency, Martin argued. But his voice lacked conviction now. No, Patricia said. It is not decency. It is financial and emotional abuse. Elaine gasped. Abuse. How dare you? We gave her everything. You gave her neglect wrapped in the guise of independence, Patricia said. And now, you are attempting to extort her. You are demanding she pay for her brother's lifestyle because you are tired of footing the bill. That is not family duty. Mrs. Hartley, that is a tax you are trying to levy on her success. I sat there, watching them. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It was the feeling of a heavy weight dissolving. For 32 years, I had carried the guilt of being the one who didn't need them. I had thought my independence was a wall I had built to keep them out. Now I realized it was a cage they had built to keep me producing. They didn't love my strength. They relied on it. They needed me to be strong so they could afford to let Dylan be weak. Layla, speak to us, Elaine said. She was crying now. Do not let this lawyer talk to us like this. We are your parents. I looked at the recorder on the table. The little red light was steady. I think Patricia is right, I said. Layla. Martin started. You called me the pillar. I said, a pillar is a thing you use to hold up a building. It is an object. It is not a person. You don't ask a pillar how it feels. You just expect it to carry the weight. I stood up. I am done carrying the weight. Dad. Martin stood up too. He looked furious. But he also looked frightened. He looked like a man who realized the bank had just foreclosed on his property. If you walk out of here, Martin threatened, his voice shaking, you are walking out on this family. You are choosing money over blood. I am choosing myself over a parasite. I said. I looked at Janet. I think we are done here. I said. Janet stood up. She smoothed her blazer. Mr. and Mrs. Hartley, Janet said, her voice cool and professional. You have been heard. However, the position of this company is clear. Any further attempts to contact Ms. Bennett at this office, or any further harassment of our employee, will be met with immediate legal action and a permanent ban from the premises. Security will escort you out now. But, Elaine stammered, we haven't fixed anything. There is nothing to fix, Patricia said. She picked up the recorder and pressed the stop button. The click was final. We have everything we need. 2 security guards appeared at the glass door. They opened it. Mr. Hartley, Mrs. Hartley, the guard said. This way, please. Martin looked at me one last time. His eyes were cold. Hard stones. You will regret this, he said. When you are old and alone in that penthouse, you will regret this. I won't. I said. He grabbed his suitcase. He grabbed Elaine's arm. She was sobbing into a tissue, playing the victim until the very last second. They walked out of the glass room, dragged their luggage past the rows of analysts and associates, and disappeared into the elevator bank. I stood in the conference room. The silence returned. Patricia exhaled. She looked at me and gave me a rare, genuine smile. They just gave us the case, she said. Admitting on tape that they view you as a financial resource. Admitting they help him because he is incapable. That kills any claim they might have to being equitable parents. It proves the coercive control. I nodded. I felt tired. But it was a clean kind of tired. It was the exhaustion of a demolition crew after the building has finally come down. I looked at the empty chairs where they had sat. I realized I had been waiting for this meeting my whole life. I had been waiting for them to see me, and they finally had. They had seen me as a checkbook, and by seeing me that way, they had set me free. I walked to the window and looked down at the street. I couldn't see them, but I knew they were down there, merging into the chaos of the city. 2 small people dragging their baggage and their lies back to the airport. I turned back to Patricia and Janet. Thank you, I said. Patricia handed me the recorder. Keep this, she said. Put it in the safe. I took the small black device. It was light, but it held the heaviest truth of my life. I walked back to my office. I sat down at my desk. I opened the drawer and placed the recorder inside, right next to the hard drive containing the spreadsheets. I was alone. My parents were gone. My brother was an enemy. The family was broken. I took a deep breath. The air in the office was cool and filtered. It was the freshest air I had ever breathed. The lawsuit arrived on a Tuesday morning in a thick, heavy manila envelope delivered by a courier who looked bored. He handed me the packet at the door of my office, asked for a signature, and walked away, unaware that he had just handed me a grenade. I took it to my desk and slit the seal. I pulled out the stack of papers. The header was standard legal formatting, but the words beneath it were a work of fiction so audacious I almost admired the creativity. Dylan Hartley versus Layla Bennett. Complaint for damages. Intentional infliction of emotional distress. Tortious interference with inheritance. And undue influence. I read the summary. My brother was suing me for $600,000. In the complaint, Dylan alleged that I had used coercive tactics and psychological manipulation on our grandfather during his final years to ensure that the bulk of his estate was funneled to me, thereby depriving the natural heir of his rightful legacy. He claimed that my purchase of the Tribeca penthouse was proof of this ill-gotten wealth, asserting that no 32-year-old woman could amass $2.6 million honestly without dipping into family coffers. He was not just suing for money. He was suing for a rewrite of history. He wanted a judge to declare that my hard work was actually theft, and his failure was actually victimization. I called Patricia immediately. "I am sending a courier to pick it up," she said, her voice calm. "Do not panic. This is what desperate people do. They throw paper at the wall and hope something sticks." When I met Patricia in her office later that afternoon, she was not worried. She was reading the complaint with a look of predatory amusement. "He has made a fatal error," Patricia said, tossing the document onto her mahogany desk. "By suing you for interference with the inheritance, he has opened the door to the estate records. If they want to drag the legacy into court, we are going to dissect the will on the public record. That is not going to end well for him." We entered the discovery phase of the lawsuit with the aggression of a strip mining operation. Patricia filed subpoenas for everything my grandfather's original estate planning documents, my parents' email correspondence regarding the estate, and 10 years of their personal communications. The boxes of digital evidence began to arrive a week later. The first revelation was the will itself. I had never seen the full document. When my grandfather died 7 years ago, I was working 80-hour weeks as a junior analyst. I had accepted the check for $60,000 that the executor mailed me, used it to pay off the last of my student loans for grad school, and went back to work. I assumed Dylan had received something similar. Patricia projected the document onto the screen in her conference room. "Look at Clause 4. She said, "I read it. To my granddaughter, Layla Bennett. I bequeath the sum of $60,000 to be used specifically for the repayment of higher education debt. She is the only one with the sense to make something of herself." I felt a lump form in my throat. He had seen me, even back then. The old man had seen me. "Read Clause 5, Patricia said, "to the Aurora County Animal Shelter. I bequeath the remainder of my liquid assets and the proceeds from the sale of my property. I do this in the hope that dogs will appreciate what my own son and grandson do, not the value of loyalty and lack of greed." I stared at the words. Dylan was not mentioned. Not a single dollar, not a watch, not a mention of his name. He was disinherited 7 years ago. Patricia said, "And look at this." She slid a printout of an email across the table. It was dated 2 days after the will was read. It was from Martin to Elaine. Subject: the will. Dylan Elaine. "We cannot tell him. If Dylan finds out the old man cut him out completely and left money to Layla and a dog pound, it will destroy him. He is already fragile after the gallery rejected his portfolio. We have to tell him the estate was smaller than expected and that it is tied up in probate. We will give him a monthly allowance from our savings and tell him it is his share of the interest. We have to protect him." And then, the line that made my blood run cold: "Do not worry about the difference. Layla got $60,000. She is smart. She will do well. Eventually, she can make it up to him. She will be the one to balance the scales later on." I put the paper down. My hand was shaking. They had lied to him for 7 years. They had let him believe there was a massive fortune that he was being denied, when in reality, the fortune never existed. They had fed his delusion with their own money, and when their money ran out, they decided I was the designated successor to the lie. "They didn't just steal from me," I whispered. "They stole reality from him." Discovery continued. It was like peeling back the wallpaper of a house to find black mold growing on every beam. We found emails from my college graduation weekend. I remembered that weekend. My parents had come to New York. We had gone to a modest Italian restaurant. Martin had complained about the price of the wine. I had paid the tip. I found an email from Martin to Elaine sent the morning of the ceremony. Subject: dinner budget. "Let us keep the dinner cheap tonight. I just transferred $4,000 to Dylan for his Europe trip. He needs that Finding Yourself tour more than Layla needs a fancy meal. She is graduating. She has a job lined up. She is fine. We need to save the capital for the one who needs a push." I read it, and strangely, I didn't cry. I felt a cold, hard verification. The memory of my father frowning at the menu wasn't just stinginess, it was a choice. He was calculating the cost of my celebration against the cost of Dylan's vacation, and I had lost. Patricia was building a timeline. She had a whiteboard in her office covered in sticky notes. 2015. Layla graduates, zero gift. Dylan goes to Europe, $4,000. 2017. Layla promotion phone call. Dylan. Startup seed money, $12,000. 2019. Layla hospitalized for exhaustion. Elaine visits for 1 day. Dylan breaks up with girlfriend Elaine, stays for 2 weeks. We found credit card statements. There was a recurring charge for $300 a month labeled Quantum Mindset Academy. I looked it up. It was an online life coaching course for aspiring alpha males. The course completion record showed 0%. Dylan had paid for 2 years of a course he never opened. And then, there was the text message from Elaine to Dylan. Sent the year I bought my first car, a used Honda. Dylan, why does she get a car? I am the one who needs to get to auditions. Elaine, hush. Honey, it is a cheap car. Do not worry about paying us back for the rent this month. We will figure it out. Besides, later on, Layla will take care of everything. She is the worker bee. You are the butterfly. The worker always feeds the hive. The worker bee, the pillar, the retirement plan. The names they had for me were endless, and every one of them was utilitarian. Patricia organized these documents into a binder 3 inches thick. This is not just a defense, Patricia said. Patting the binder. This is a demolition. We are going to prove that not only is his claim of inheritance false, but that he has been the beneficiary of a decade-long campaign of financial favoritism. We are going to show the judge that you are the victim of systemic financial abuse. We needed witnesses. Tessa came through. She met us at Patricia's office on a rainy Thursday. She looked nervous, but her jaw was set. I remember the 18th birthdays. Tessa told Patricia while the stenographer typed. I was there, for Dylan. They rented the lounge at the country club. There was a DJ. There was that BMW in the driveway with the big red bow. Martin gave a speech about how Dylan was the prince of the family, and for Layla. Tessa paused, looking at me with tears in her eyes. We went to the Pizza Hut on Route 9. Martin forgot his wallet in the car, so Layla paid for the pitchers of soda. There was no car. There was a refurbished laptop that Martin said was good enough for school. That is on the record, Patricia said gently. Thank you, Tessa. But the final blow came from an unexpected source. 2 days before the scheduled deposition, I received an email from Noah, a guy I had gone to college with. He had been friends with Dylan back then, part of the circle of creatives that Dylan liked to hold court with. Hey Layla, I saw the video on Twitter. It made me sick. I found an old voice memo on my hard drive from our junior year. We were stoned in the dorms, talking about the future. I thought you should have this. I clicked the audio file. The sound of a bong bubbling, laughter, and then Dylan's voice. Younger, less bitter, but just as arrogant. Dude, I am not worried about money, Dylan said on the recording. My parents are obsessed with me. They will never let me fail. They bail me out of everything. What about your sister Noah's voice asked. Doesn't she get pissed? Layla Dylan laughed. Nah, she is a grinder. She likes working. My dad says she is built to suffer, so I don't have to. She is like the draft horse. And I am the jockey. She pulls the cart. I ride the glory. It is sweet. I sat in my penthouse office, playing that clip over and over. She is built to suffer, so I don't have to. It wasn't just my parents. Dylan knew. He had known since he was 20 years old. He wasn't a helpless victim of their coddling. He was an active participant in my exploitation. He saw me as a draft horse. He saw himself as the rider. I forwarded the file to Patricia. Subject, the smoking gun. Patricia replied 1 minute later. We have him. This proves he understood the dynamic. It proves malice. We are going to court. Layla. And we are going to destroy him. I stood up and walked to the mirror. For weeks, I had felt a lingering shred of guilt. Was I being too hard? Was I abandoning family? But as I looked at myself, the draft horse, I realized the harness was gone. I wasn't a draft horse. I was a thoroughbred who had just kicked down the stable door. I looked at the binder of evidence on my desk. It was no longer just paper. It was my emancipation proclamation. I was ready for court. I wasn't afraid of the judge. I wasn't afraid of the jury. I was only afraid of one thing, that I hadn't done this sooner. The weeks leading up to the trial were not filled with the dramatic shouting matches that people see in movies. They were filled with paper. Mountains of it. We were building a fortress out of documents, constructing a wall of facts so high and so thick that no amount of emotional manipulation could breach it. Patricia sat across from me in her office, her desk covered in binders. The city outside was gray and rainy, a reflection of the storm we were about to walk into. "We are not just going to defend you, Layla," Patricia said. Her voice was sharp, precise. "If we only defend, we validate his claim that there is a debate to be had. We are going to prosecute." She turned a binder around so I could see the spine. It was labeled Systemic Financial Abuse. "Our strategy is to prove that this lawsuit is not an attempt to recover an inheritance," Patricia continued. "It is an extension of a lifetime of coercive control. We are going to demonstrate that Dylan is using the judicial system as a weapon to extort money from you because his parents have finally run dry." To do this, Patricia hired a forensic accountant named Mr. Henderson. He was a man who looked like he had never smiled in his life, and I liked him immediately. He did not care about family dynamics. He did not care about feelings. He cared about the flow of capital. He spent 3 days in a conference room with the bank records I had downloaded and the additional documents we had obtained during discovery. When he emerged, he had created a visual representation of my family's love. It was a bar graph. On the left was a towering blue column representing funds transferred to Dylan. It rose so high it nearly touched the top of the page. On the right was a tiny, barely visible sliver of red representing funds transferred to me. Mr. Henderson pointed a laser pointer at the blue tower. "This is not assistance," he said in a dry monotone. "This is a secondary income stream. Your parents have essentially been paying him an annual salary of $45,000 tax-free for a decade." He moved the pointer to my tiny sliver. "And this," he said, "is statistical noise. It is negligible." Seeing it like that, turned into stark geometry, did something to me. It turned the lingering guilt in my stomach into cold iron. I was not crazy. I was not selfish. I was simply the only person in the family who was not on the payroll. But the numbers were only half the battle. To prove the emotional component, I had to go back into the archives. I spent my nights in the Penthouse, sitting on the floor with a bottle of wine and a box of old hard drives. I had to find the context for the checks. I found an email from my sophomore year of college. Subject: car repairs. I had written to my father asking for $300 because my radiator had cracked. His reply was one line: "We are tight this month. Layla, take an extra shift at the library. You need to learn to manage your cash flow." I opened the spreadsheet. I cross-referenced the date. 2 days after he sent that email, there was a transfer of $4,000 to a body shop in Boulder. The memo line read, "Dylan, fender bender. He had crashed his car. They had paid $4,000 to fix it without a word. And they had lectured me about cash flow over a radiator." I printed the email. I stapled it to the bank transfer record. Painful memories usually weaken you, but tonight, every stinging memory made me feel stronger. Every time I remembered being told I was too intense or too greedy, I found a financial transaction that proved I was actually just being neglected. The pain was no longer meaningless suffering. It was evidence. The next day, I went to Graham Lockwood's office. This was the part I feared the most. In many corporate environments, a lawsuit like this, messy, public, involving allegations of fraud, would be enough to get an executive quietly pushed out the door. Companies hate drama. They hate liability. I knocked on the glass door. "Come in." "Layla?" Graham said. He was reviewing a merger agreement. He put his pen down and looked at me. "I have the deposition request," he said. I felt my breath catch. "I wanted to give you an out. Graham, you do not have to do this. I can ask Patricia to depose a former colleague instead. I do not want to drag the firm into my family's mud." Graham stood up. He walked over to the window and looked out at the city. "Layla, do you know why I hired you 7 years ago?" he asked. "Because I had good grades," I ventured. "Because you were hungry," he said. He turned back to me. I saw someone who had absolutely no safety net. Most of the kids we hire, they have parents in Connecticut who can pay their rent if they burn out. You didn't. You worked like someone who knew that if you fell, you would hit the concrete. He walked back to his desk and picked up the subpoena. I am testifying, he said. I am going to tell the court exactly how you earned that $2.6 million. I am going to tell them about the nights you slept under your desk. I am going to tell them about the millions of dollars of profit you have generated for this firm. He opened a drawer and pulled out a document on Westward Orion letterhead. He slid it across the desk. And this is for you, he said. I picked it up. It was a formal letter signed by the partners. It stated that Westward Orion Equity Group stood fully behind me, that my employment was secure, and that the firm viewed the allegations against me as meritless personal harassment. We are not letting them take your seat. Layla, Graham said, you earned it. I walked out of his office holding that letter like a shield. My family wanted to tear me down to their level. My company, the place they called Soulless, was the only entity treating me with humanity. 2 nights before the trial, my phone rang. It was Tessa. Her voice was hushed, as if she was hiding in a closet. Layla, she said, I have something. What is it? I asked. I was sitting at my dining table, surrounded by the trial binders. It is Aunt Marjorie, Tessa whispered. She was drinking wine with my mom last night. She started talking about the old days. She said she remembers the year Dylan went to Europe to find himself. I looked at the timeline on my wall. That was the year I graduated. She said she was at the house when Martin came home from the bank. Tessa continued. She said Martin was crying. He told her he had to liquidate a chunk of his 401k to pay for Dylan's trip and his credit card debt. He paid the early withdrawal penalty and everything. My hand tightened on the phone. He rated his retirement, I asked. Yes, Tessa said. And Aunt Marjorie is willing to write a sworn statement. She said she is tired of watching them crucify you to cover up their own bad math. I called Patricia immediately. We have the nail in the coffin, I told her. When I explained about the retirement fund, Patricia actually let out a low whistle. That explains the desperation. Patricia said, they are not just greedy, Layla. They are broke. They spent their golden years funding his adolescence, and now they are looking at you to be the pension plan they destroyed. The next morning, the settlement offer arrived. It came in an email from Dylan's lawyer, a man named Mr. Sterling, who had a reputation for being loud and cheap. Subject settlement proposal. Hartley Vars. Bennett. I sat in Patricia's office as she read it aloud. Mr. Hartley is willing to drop all claims and dismiss the lawsuit with prejudice in exchange for a one-time payment of $250,000. Additionally, both parties will sign a non-disclosure agreement regarding family financial history. Patricia looked up over her reading glasses. And here's the kicker, she said. She read the last paragraph. If this offer is not accepted by 5 p.m. tomorrow, the plaintiff intends to introduce character evidence regarding Ms. Bennett's personal life and alleged manipulation of family elders into the public record. It was blackmail. Thinly veiled, legal-sounding blackmail. They were asking for $250,000 to go away. They were holding my reputation hostage. Patricia put the paper down. She looked at me with serious, dark eyes. This is the moment. Layla, she said, you can write a check. You have the money. You can pay $250,000. And this stops. No court, no testimony, no press. You go back to your life, and they go away for a few years. She paused, or she said, we decline. We go to court on Monday, and we expose everything. It will be ugly. They will say terrible things about you on the stand, but it will be final. I looked out the window at the Hudson River. The water was choppy, gray, and relentless. If I paid them, I would be doing exactly what they wanted. I would be the bottomless wallet. I would be buying my peace, just like my father bought Dylan's silence with sports cars and trips to Italy. $250,000 would last Dylan 2 years, maybe 3, and then he would be back. He would have a new crisis, a new threat, a new demand, I thought about the spreadsheet. $452,000. I thought about the retirement fund my father had drained. I thought about the worker bee text message. I am not paying them. I said. Patricia nodded slowly. Are you sure it is going to be a war zone in that courtroom? I turned to face her. I have been living in a war zone for 30 years. Patricia, I said, I just didn't have any weapons. Now I do. I want you to reply to Mr. Sterling. I instructed. Tell him what she asked, pen hovering over her notepad. Tell him, I said, my voice steady and cold, that my counteroffer is 0. Tell him we will see him in court at 9 a.m. on Monday, and tell him to bring his calculator. Patricia smiled. It was a sharp, dangerous smile. Done, she said. The weekend passed in a blur of preparation. I rehearsed my testimony. I memorized dates. I looked at the photos of my childhood and forced myself to see them not as memories, but as exhibits. Exhibit A, the forgotten birthday. Exhibit B, the golden child's graduation. On Monday morning, the day of the trial. I woke up before the alarm. The sky was clear and blue, a rare, perfect New York morning. I showered and dressed. I did not put on a dress. I put on a suit. It was charcoal gray, tailored to within an inch of its life. It was sharp. It was severe. It was the kind of suit a man would wear to a hostile takeover. I stood in front of the full-length mirror in my hallway. I looked at my reflection. For weeks, I had felt like the defendant. I had felt like the accused sister, the selfish daughter, the thief. But as I adjusted the lapel of my jacket, I realized that was the wrong mindset. I am not the defendant. I said aloud to the empty penthouse. I picked up my leather briefcase. It was heavy with the evidence of my own exploitation. I am the only person in that room who has actually done the work. I whispered. I walked to the door. I took one last look at the apartment I had bought, the apartment that was the catalyst for this entire explosion. It was beautiful. It was quiet. It was mine. I opened the door and walked out. I was not going to court to defend myself. I was going to court to foreclose on the debt they had forced me to carry for a lifetime. The courtroom in Lower Manhattan smelled of lemon polish and old, decaying paper. It was a smell I knew well from corporate litigation, but today it felt different. It felt personal. The room was lined with dark mahogany panels that seemed to absorb the light, making the space feel smaller and more oppressive than it actually was. The ceiling was high, arched, and indifferent to the human dramas playing out beneath it. I sat at the defendant's table next to Patricia. I kept my hands folded on the table, perfectly still. Behind me, in the gallery, I could hear the shifting of fabric. A few of my relatives had come. Aunt Marjorie was there, wearing a hat that looked like it belonged at a funeral. Uncle Ted sat 2 rows back, arms crossed, looking like he would rather be getting a root canal. On the other side of the aisle sat my parents and Dylan. They were clustered together like survivors on a life raft. Dylan was wearing a suit that was slightly too large for him, likely bought by Martin specifically for this occasion. He was staring at the judge with a look of practiced tragedy. The judge, the Honorable Justice Evelyn Vance, entered. She was a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and a face that suggested she had heard every lie ever told in the English language. Mr. Sterling, Dylan's attorney, stood up for his opening statement. He was a man who wore too much cologne. I could smell it from across the aisle. He buttoned his jacket and turned to the judge, his voice dropping into a register of deep, theatrical sorrow. Your Honor, he began, we are here today to discuss a tragedy, not a tragedy of physical violence, but a tragedy of the soul. My client, Dylan Hartley, is an artist, a sensitive, creative spirit. He is a man who trusted his family. He trusted his sister. And what did he receive in return? Betrayal. He gestured toward me with an accusatory hand. The defendant, Layla Bennett, is a woman of finance, a woman of cold calculation. She manipulated her dying grandfather to cut off the rightful male heir. She amassed a fortune of $2.6 million not through merit alone, but by siphoning off the resources that were meant to support the family legacy. She has stripped her brother of his financial birthright and, more importantly, his dignity. We are asking for $600,000 in damages for emotional distress and loss of inheritance. I watched him speak. I did not blink. I did not frown. I let his words hit me and slide off like water off a sealed deck. Patricia stood up. She did not use flowery language. She walked to the podium and connected her laptop to the courtroom's projection system. "Your Honor," Patricia said. Her voice was crisp, cutting through the humidity of Sterling's speech. "Mr. Sterling wants to tell you a story about feelings. I would like to show you a story about facts." She clicked a remote. A large screen to the left of the judge's bench lit up. It was a slide titled, "Exhibit at 18th Birthdays." On the left side of the screen was a photo of Dylan on his 18th birthday. He was standing in the driveway of my parents' house, grinning, leaning against a silver BMW with a giant red bow on the hood. My parents were standing next to him, beaming with pride. On the right side was a photo of me on my 18th birthday. It was grainy, taken in low light at a pizza parlor. I was sitting at a Formica table with a small pepperoni pizza. In front of me was a refurbished laptop, thick and clunky even for the time. My father was in the background of the photo, looking at a receipt with a frown. "This is the plaintiff at 18, Patricia said. "He received a $38,000 vehicle. This is the defendant at 18. She received a $300 computer and paid for her own dinner because her father claimed he forgot his wallet." The courtroom was silent. I heard Aunt Marjorie inhale sharply. Patricia clicked the remote again. "We are not here to dispute an inheritance," Patricia continued. "We are here to prove that the plaintiff has already received his inheritance. He just spent it." She called our first witness, Mr. Henderson, the forensic accountant. Mr. Henderson walked to the stand carrying a briefcase that looked like it contained nuclear codes. He took the oath and sat down, adjusting his glasses. "Mr. Henderson," Patricia said, "can you explain your findings regarding the financial transfers between the parents, Martin and Elaine Hartley, and the plaintiff, Dylan Hartley?" "Certainly," Mr. Henderson said. His voice was a dry monotone that made the numbers sound even more devastating. He opened a binder. "I analyzed 10 years of bank statements from the joint account of Martin and Elaine Hartley. I categorized transfers based on memo lines, check images, and recurring patterns." "And what was the total?" Patricia asked. $452,000, Mr. Henderson stated. Sterling jumped up. "Objection relevance overruled," Judge Vance said. She was looking at the accountant with interest. "Continue. $452,000 transferred to Dylan Hartley over a period of 120 months. Mr. Henderson repeated, "This includes direct cash transfers, payments for 3 failed business ventures, rent payments for 5 different apartments, legal fees, and luxury travel." "And what was the total transferred to the defendant?" Layla Bennett. In that same period, Patricia asked, $9,450. Mr. Henderson said, "Primarily in the form of birthday gifts averaging $50 and one lump sum for graduate school supplies." "Thank you," Patricia said. Sterling tried to cross-examine him, trying to suggest that the numbers were open to interpretation, but Mr. Henderson just pointed at the bank stamps. "Math is not an opinion," Mr. Henderson said simply. Next, Patricia called Graham Lockwood. When Graham walked in, the energy in the room shifted. He wore a suit that cost more than my father's car. He exuded the kind of power that does not need to raise its voice. "Mr. Lockwood," Patricia asked, "how long has Layla Bennett worked for you?" 7 years, Graham said. "And how would you characterize her financial status? Did she receive help from her family to buy her apartment?" Graham laughed. It was a short, sharp sound. "Absolutely not. When I hired Layla, she was wearing shoes she had glued back together. She worked 80-hour weeks. She slept under her desk during the merger with Kincaid Logistics. I paid her bonuses because she generated over $40 million in profit for my firm in the last 3 years. She bought that penthouse with money she bled for." Mr. Sterling stood up for cross-examination. He looked at Graham with a sneer. "Mr. Lockwood," Sterling said, "you seem very fond of the defendant. Is it common for a managing partner to be so involved in the personal finances of a subordinate? Perhaps there is a more personal reason you are defending her. The implication hung in the air. It was dirty. It was cheap. Graham did not flinch. He looked at Sterling with the same expression he used when looking at a bad contract. "Mr. Sterling," Graham said, his voice dropping 10 degrees. "Westward Orion is an investment firm. We deal in equity. We deal in return on investment. We favor profit, not sentiment, and we certainly do not favor nepotism. Layla Bennett is the best analyst I have. If she were a man, you would be calling her a shark, because she is a woman. You are implying she is a mistress. That says more about your client's insecurities than her competence." Sterling sat down, his face red. Then came Tessa. My cousin walked to the stand looking terrified, but she didn't look at Martin or Elaine. She looked straight at me. "Ms. Hartley," Patricia said, "you were present at many family gatherings. Can you describe the dynamic between the parents and the children?" Tessa took a breath. "It was a shrine," she said. Her voice shook, then steadied. The whole family was a shrine to Dylan. He was the genius. He was the artist. Layla was just the utility. "Can you be specific?" Patricia asked. "I remember a dinner," Tessa said. "It was right after Layla got into Columbia. Martin didn't even toast her. He spent the whole night talking about Dylan's new idea for a t-shirt company, and when I asked Elaine why they didn't celebrate Layla more, she looked at me and said, 'Layla is strong. She doesn't need us. She doesn't need anything.'" Tessa wiped her eye. "They said it right in front of her." Tessa whispered, like she was a machine. Martin was staring at his shoes. Elaine was weeping softly into a handkerchief, shaking her head as if she were the victim of a great misunderstanding. Patricia then produced a piece of paper. "Your Honor," Patricia said, "we have a sworn affidavit from Marjorie Evans, the sister of Martin Hartley. She could not be here today due to health reasons, but she has submitted this statement." Judge Vance nodded. "Read it." Patricia held the paper up. "I, Marjorie Evans, attest that on June 4th, 2015, my brother Martin Hartley told me that he had liquidated a significant portion of his 401k retirement plan to fund his son's trip to Europe. When I asked him how he planned to retire, he told me, and I quote, 'Layla will be the new retirement plan. She is the worker. She will take care of us.'" The courtroom went deadly silent. I looked at my father. He was not looking at his shoes anymore. He was looking at the wall. His jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscle jumping. The secret was out. The strategy was laid bare. Finally, it was time for Dylan. "Mr. Sterling called him to the stand. Dylan walked up, trying to maintain his air of aggrieved nobility. "Dylan," Sterling asked, "tell the court why you believe you are entitled to this money." "Because it was Grandpa's," Dylan said. His voice was soft. "He wanted to support my art. He believed in me. Layla manipulated him when he was sick." Patricia stood up for cross-examination. She walked to the podium. She did not bring any papers. She just looked at him. "Mr. Hartley," Patricia said, "you describe yourself as a professional artist. Can you tell the court your total revenue from art sales in the last 5 years?" Dylan shifted in his chair. "Well, art isn't about commerce. It is about impact. I am asking about dollars," Patricia said. "How much?" Dylan mumbled something. "I am sorry," Patricia said. "0, Dylan said louder. "I haven't sold anything yet. I am building a portfolio." "0, Patricia repeated. "And you claim you were close to your grandfather?" "Yes," Dylan said. "We had a spiritual connection." "When was the last time you visited him before he died?" Patricia asked. Dylan blinked. I was busy. I was in residency. We have the visitor logs from the nursing home," Patricia said. "Your sister visited him every Sunday for 2 years. You did not visit him once in the last 18 months of his life. Is that correct?" "I have a phobia of hospitals," Dylan snapped. He understood that. "So you didn't visit him," Patricia said. "You didn't earn any money. You have received nearly $500,000 from your parents, and yet, you believe you are the victim here." "Yes," Dylan shouted. He leaned over the railing. "Because she has everything. Look at her. She has a penthouse. She has millions. And I have nothing. It is not fair. Why isn't it fair?" Patricia asked. Her voice was quiet, dangerous. Why do you deserve her money? Because, Dylan stammered. Because why? Patricia pressed. Because you worked for it. No. Because you were promised it. We have the will. You weren't. So why? Dylan's face turned a splotchy red. He looked at his parents, who were staring at him with wide, terrified eyes. He looked at the judge. He looked at me. Because I am the son, he screamed. The words echoed off the high ceiling. Because I am the sun. It hung in the air like a toxic cloud. He had said it. He had stripped away all the pretenses of art, of sensitivity, of justice. He had boiled it down to the one archaic, wrought core belief that had driven this entire family for 30 years. He believed he owned me because he was male and I was female. The courtroom was absolutely frozen. Even Sterling looked down at his papers, knowing he couldn't fix this. Elaine covered her mouth with her hand. Martin closed his eyes. They knew. They knew that their son had just exposed the ugly, misogynistic heart of their parenting philosophy to a judge in the state of New York. Patricia let the silence stretch for 5 full seconds. No further questions. Your Honor, Patricia said. Dylan sat there, panting, realizing too late what he had done. He looked small. He didn't look like an artist. He looked like a spoiled child who had broken his favorite toy and was confused why no one was rushing to buy him a new one. He stepped down from the stand. Patricia moved to the closing argument. Your Honor, she said, facing Judge Vance, the plaintiff wants you to believe that his sister stole his inheritance, but the evidence shows something very different. Layla Bennett did not steal anything. She worked. She saved. She built a life. Patricia pointed at me. The only thing my client has done is refuse to continue being the inheritance. She refused to be the resource that her family mines to pay for their son's failures. They are not suing her for what she took. They are suing her for what she stopped giving. They are suing her because she finally closed the bank of Layla Bennett. And that, Your Honor, is not a crime. It is emancipation. Judge Vance looked at me. Her expression was unreadable, but her eyes were not unkind. She gathered her robes. Thank you, counsel. The judge said, I have heard the arguments. I have seen the evidence. I will issue my ruling tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. Court is adjourned. The gavel banged. It was a sharp, wooden sound that signaled the end of the show. I stood up. I felt lightheaded. Martin and Elaine were already rushing Dylan out of the side door, heads down, avoiding the gaze of Aunt Marjorie, who was staring at them with open disgust. I turned to Patricia. We did it, I whispered. Patricia nodded. She looked exhausted but satisfied. We did. She said, Now, go home, Layla. Go to your penthouse. Drink a glass of wine. It is over. I walked out of the courthouse into the bright afternoon sun. The air smelled of exhaust and hot asphalt. But to me, it smelled like victory. I had walked into that room as a defendant. I was walking out as a woman who had finally, publicly, and legally declared that she belonged to no one but herself. The morning of the verdict was silent. It was the kind of silence that usually precedes a natural disaster. But this time, I knew the devastation would not be mine. I walked into the courthouse alone. I had told Graham and Patricia that they did not need to hold my hand, but they were there anyway, sitting in the row behind me like a silent, invisible wall of reinforced steel. My parents were not sitting behind me. They were huddled on the other side of the aisle, whispering to Dylan, who looked pale and sweaty, like a man who was slowly realizing that the world was not a stage built for his monologue. We stood when Judge Vance entered. She moved with the swift, no-nonsense energy of a woman who had a full docket and very little patience for theatrics. She sat down, adjusted her glasses, and looked directly at Dylan. I have reviewed the evidence, Judge Vance said. Her voice was not loud, but it filled every corner of the room. I have reviewed the bank records provided by the defense. I have reviewed the testimony regarding the estate of the late grandfather, and I have reviewed the plaintiff's own admissions regarding his lack of income and his estrangement from the deceased. She paused. Dylan was gripping the table so hard his knuckles were white. I find the plaintiff's claim to be entirely without merit, she said. I let out a breath I felt like I had been holding for 30 years. Furthermore, Judge Vance continued, her eyes narrowing, I find the nature of this lawsuit to be vexatious. The plaintiff has used the court system not to seek justice, but to attempt to extract funds from a family member through intimidation and public shaming. This was a blatant attempt at extortion using the legal process as a weapon. She looked at Mr. Sterling, who was staring at his notepad, refusing to meet her gaze. Case dismissed with prejudice, she ruled. And given the frivolous nature of the claim and the undeniable financial disparity proven by the defense, I am ordering the plaintiff to pay the legal fees and court costs incurred by the defendant. She looked at a paper on her desk. The plaintiff is ordered to pay Layla Bennett the sum of $120,000. She said, $120,000. I heard a sound from the other table. It was a gasp, followed by a sharp, choked sob. It came from Elaine. $120,000 was not money Dylan had. It was money he would never have. It was a debt that would crush him, or more likely, crush the people who had spent their lives shielding him from gravity. Judge Vance took off her glasses. She looked at me for the first time. Ms. Bennett, she said. I stood up. Yes, Your Honor. In my 20 years on the bench, I have seen many family disputes, she said, but I rarely see documentation this thorough. You have been accused of abuse in this courtroom. I want the record to reflect my observation that the only person in this room who has endured long-term systemic abuse is the defendant, not the plaintiff. You are free to go. She banged the gavel. It was over. The judge swept out of the room. I turned to Patricia. She didn't say a word. She just reached out and squeezed my hand. It was a firm, professional squeeze, but I felt the warmth of it travel all the way up my arm. We walked out of the courtroom. The hallway outside was chaos. Dylan was backed against the wall near the water fountains. He was not crying. He was vibrating with rage. Martin and Elaine were standing in front of him, looking like two people who had just watched their house burn down and were being asked to pay for the matches. You have to pay it, Dylan was screaming. He didn't care who heard him. He didn't care about the bailiffs walking by. You told me to do this. You said we would settle. You said she would write a check to make it go away. We don't have it. Dylan, Martin stammered. His voice was a ghost of the booming baritone I had grown up with. We gave you the last of the savings for the lawyer retainer. The retirement account is empty. You have to fix this, Dylan shrieked. He grabbed Martin's lapels. They are going to garnish my wages. They are going to ruin my credit. $120,000. Where am I supposed to get that? Sell the house. You have to sell the house. Elaine was weeping, her face buried in her hands. I cannot believe this, she sobbed. How did this happen? We were just trying to help. I walked toward the exit. I had to pass them to get to the elevators. I did not slow down. I did not look at the floor. I looked straight ahead, my heels clicking a steady, rhythmic beat on the marble floor. Click, 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 Layla. It was Dylan. He had spotted me. He broke away from Martin and lunged toward me. Graham Lockwood stepped in between us instantly, his broad shoulder blocking Dylan's path. But Dylan didn't try to hit me. He just screamed. Are you happy? He yelled. His face was twisted, ugly with hate and fear. You destroyed this family. You ruined everything. You bankrupted us. I stopped. I turned around. I looked at him. I looked at the brother who had been the sun in my parents' solar system for as long as I could remember. He looked small now. He looked like a man who was finally feeling the cold of deep space. I looked at Martin, who was staring at me with a mixture of hatred and devastation. I looked at Elaine, who was looking at me like I was a monster she had accidentally created. No, I said. My voice was calm. It didn't echo. It just landed. I didn't destroy anything. I said, I just stopped paying your bills. I turned back around. I walked into the elevator. The doors slid shut, cutting off the sight of my mother's tears and my brother's rage. The silence in the elevator was absolute. I leaned my head back against the metal wall and closed my eyes. I didn't cry. I didn't laugh. I just breathed. 3 months later, the news came through Tessa. I was sitting in my office at Westward Orion, looking at a projection for a new tech IPO, when her text popped up. Tessa. They listed the house in Aurora today. I stared at the message. The house in Aurora. The house where I had spent my teen years hiding in my room studying. The house where Dylan had thrown parties I wasn't invited to. The house where the table was set for a king and a servant, Tessa. They are asking below market value. Martin told Aunt Marjorie they have to sell fast to cover legal debts. They are moving into a 2-bedroom rental near the airport. Dylan is moving in with them. I put the phone down. I felt a flicker of something pity. Maybe, but it was distant, like watching a car crash on the news in a different country. They were selling the house to pay the judgment. They were selling their home to pay me. I didn't want the money. I never wanted the money. But I knew I had to take it. If I forgave the debt, I would be doing exactly what I had always done, subsidizing their mistakes. Collecting that $120,000 was the only way to force them to finally, truly feel the weight of their own choices. I picked up the phone and called Patricia. The check from the judgment. I said, "Has it cleared?" "It is in escrow." Patricia said, "It cleared yesterday." "Good," I said. "Proceed with the paperwork." 2 weeks later, the Hartley Boundaries Scholarship was officially registered. Patricia and I set it up with a specific charter. It was a full-ride scholarship for first-generation college students. But the criteria were unique. We weren't just looking for grades. We were looking for students who had been financially or emotionally cut off by their families for choosing education over obligation. We were looking for the scapegoats. We were looking for the pillars who were tired of holding up the roof. The initial endowment was exactly $120,000. When the first recipient was selected, Tessa sent me a photo. It was a young girl named Maya, 18 years old, standing in front of a brick dormitory. She was smiling, but her eyes looked tired, the kind of tired I recognized. She was holding a letter of acceptance. "Tessa, look at this. The money he tried to steal from you is paying for her freedom. Life is funny, isn't it?" I saved the photo. I looked at Maya's face. She didn't know me. She didn't know that her tuition was paid for by a man's failed attempt to extort his sister. She just knew that she was free. That weekend, I was invited to speak at a Women in Finance Leadership Summit in Chicago. I stood on the stage in a ballroom filled with 500 women. I had prepared a speech about market volatility and risk assessment, but as I looked out at the crowd, I saw a young woman in the front row. She looked nervous. She was dressed in a suit that looked slightly cheap, and she was taking notes furiously, as if her life depended on it. I put my prepared cards down. "I want to talk about a different kind of risk today." I said into the microphone, "I want to talk about the risk of being the good daughter." The room went quiet. I told them the story. I didn't use names, but I didn't hide the ugliness. I told them about the spreadsheet. I told them about the $452,000 versus the $9,000. I told them about the lawsuit. I projected the bar graph onto the massive screen behind me, the blue tower and the red sliver. There was a collective gasp in the room. "Many of you are the pillars of your families." I said, "You are the ones who made it. And because you made it, you are expected to pay for those who didn't. You are told that family is everything. But I am here to tell you that family is not a bill you are obligated to pay for the rest of your life. You are allowed to close the account." After the speech, the young woman from the front row came up to me. She was shaking. "My dad calls me his retirement plan, too." She whispered, "I send them half my paycheck. I feel like I'm drowning." I reached into my bag and pulled out a business card. I wrote my personal email on the back. "Make a spreadsheet." I told her, "Write it all down. See the numbers, and then stop paying." She took the card like it was a lifeline. That night, I flew back to New York. It was late when I got to the Penthouse. The city was asleep, or as asleep as New York ever gets. I poured myself a glass of wine, a bottle of vintage Pinot Noir that I had bought simply because I liked the label. I didn't have to ask anyone's permission to drink it. I didn't have to share it. I walked out onto the terrace. The wind was cold, coming off the Hudson, but it felt clean. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. It was a text from a number I didn't have saved, but I knew who it was. "You ruined everything. I hope you rot in that apartment." It was Dylan. I looked at the words. A year ago. That text would have ruined my week. It would have made me question my morality. It would have made me cry. Now, I just looked at it as data. It was a final, desperate ping from a satellite that had drifted out of orbit. I didn't reply. I didn't type out a justification. I didn't block him. I just deleted the message. I went to my laptop, which was sitting on the outdoor table. I found the folder on my desktop labeled Family and Evidence. It was full of pain. It was full of recordings of my mother's guilt trips, videos of my brother's tantrums, spreadsheets of my father's neglect. It was a digital museum of my trauma. I right-clicked on the folder. I selected Move to Archive. I dragged it off my desktop and into an external hard drive folder named Closed Cases. I wasn't deleting it. I would never delete it. I needed to keep it, just in case they ever tried to come back. But I didn't need to look at it every day. It didn't need to take up space on my screen. I closed the laptop. I walked to the edge of the balcony and looked down at the street. 20 stories below. The cars looked like toys. The people looked like ants. I felt huge. I felt solid. I took a sip of wine. The liquid was rich and dark. I didn't steal anyone's inheritance. I whispered to the wind. I raised the glass to the skyline. A toast to the woman I had fought so hard to become. I just took back the life that was rightfully mine. Thank you so much for listening to this story. It was a journey to write Layla's truth, and I hope it resonated with some of you who might be fighting your own battles for independence. Please comment below and let me know where you are listening from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe to the Maya Revenge Stories channel, like the video, and hit that hype button so more people can hear Layla's story. Your support means the world to me. Stay strong. Everyone.